Chapter 116. When Nua Iyer reached out her hand to stop Luoya from kneeling, Luoya was a little confused. Not kneeling in front of the king was normal in this world. After all, the king was only the head of the nobles. He didn't have absolute control over the nobles. However, it was different during the ceremony of receiving a title. It was a tradition to kneel on one knee to express respect. Don't kneel. Upon hearing Noel's words, the young man lifted his head and met the young lady's affectionate gaze. After pondering for a moment, he straightened his body. The moment he straightened his body, the crowd in the hall behind him was in an uproar. What's going on? Why did he stand up? Her Royal Highness asked him to stand up. Really? What's going on? The guests who had never seen such a scene began to discuss and speculate. Some said that it was normal for the ceremony to be different from a title. Some said that it was a change in the rules of the royal family. Some even guessed that it was an impromptu wedding. The audience was shocked, but what they didn't know was that the royal family and the staff were even more shocked. In the first row of the crowd, Prince Cain, who saw Noel's nonsense, couldn't help but turn his head and look at St. John with a frown. "Father, isn't it a little inappropriate for Nua Iyer to do this?" "Inappropriate? What's inappropriate?" The gray-haired St. John blinked his eyes when he heard Cain's words, as if he didn't understand what his son was talking about. His Royal Highness looked ahead and said, "It's really disrespectful to change the rules set by the ancestors. The process of the ceremony is messed up." Bishop John was stunned. He looked at his son as if he was looking at an idiot. His face was full of disdain. "Process my ass, your daughter is flirting with a man. Our family is here today to do this. Can't you see it?" I, John, was also proud of Saint Mestre's love saint. How did I give birth to such an idiot? Granddaughters are the best. I finally understand why a prince like you is the one who chose your wife. Why did you suddenly mention this? Cain, who was suddenly attacked by his father, was dumbfounded. John of the Holy See rolled his eyes and ignored him. The old man looked at the Nua Iyer in front of him and made a gesture of support. He also notified the etiquette officer. "Oh right, I remember that the covenant ceremony doesn't require kneeling, right? Let's go with that." The blonde girl in front of him breathed a sigh of relief when she heard Hardadef's order. Luoya looked at the restless crowd in the hall and couldn't help but speak. "So you didn't have a plan?" "Yeah, I just changed my mind at the last minute." Nua Iyer held his sword and smiled. He seemed to be surprised by his own actions. "It's just a kneel. I don't really mind. If you want to kneel, I welcome it when there are only two of us. But forget it in front of outsiders. I don't like people I like kneeling to me." The overly ferocious straight ball hit Luoya's heart, causing the young man's heart to beat wildly. Even his breathing was almost broken. He looked at the Nua Iyer who put down the Holy King's sword according to the etiquette officer's instructions. He couldn't help but have a unique feeling in his heart. "Your Royal Highness, the Covenant of Equality requires a token. What do you think of the short blade of the Holy King that is to be given to Luoya?" Not bad. Let's use that." Upon hearing the etiquette officer's suggestion, Nua Iyer readily agreed. The short blade of the Holy King could be said to be an opportunity for her and Luoya to get closer. It was bathed in the blood of both of them. From this point of view, it was the most appropriate token. After a burst of noise, the hall quieted down again. Under the gaze of everyone, Nua Iyer stretched out her hand and raised the short blade in the shape of a white feather. She injected her power into it. The next moment, the short blade of the Holy King shone brightly, and a layer of halo shrouded the two of them. The Holy King had a spirit, and naturally, it would protect its master. Now that the two masters were in front of it, the short blade of the Holy King immediately became lively like a child who was reuniting with his parents. Its originally metallic blade became more and more lifelike, and the holy aura continued to spread. For a moment, it made the originally holy St. Cecil Hall look like a heavenly realm. The crowd began to scream and scream. This feeling. St. John and Prince Cain looked at each other. They both felt the holy aura sweep past them, and the bloodline power in their bodies began to stir. This strange feeling was obviously not the standard of a holy king, but in fact, The one who felt this feeling the most was Noel himself. Chapter 117. Ever since she developed feelings for Luoya, Ayr had been troubled by a problem. Their relationship might be a long-distance relationship. As a princess, Nua Ayr was usually very busy. Most of her activities were in the Holy Capital and the Night Order. As the only child of the Akat family, Luoya also had to stay in his territory. Thus, there was a problem. What if someone burglarized her house when she wasn't there? As the saying goes, those who kill will always be killed. It was the same when it came to stealing. A professional crystal thief, Nua Ayr, strictly speaking, was the one who stole the AI Lizzie. Learning from her mistakes, she didn't dare to be careless when it came to her turn. Furthermore, Nua Ayr glanced at Luoya's face under the wings of light. She couldn't help but feel her heart skip a beat. In terms of appearance, Luoya was very attractive. He even had a ridiculously beautiful adopted sister by his side. Furthermore, he didn't have much vigilance. It would be a waste if he didn't take precautions. However, it was easier said than done to take precautions. Even Nua Ayr didn't have the confidence to generate electricity from a distance. However, she didn't expect that the skill, Afterglow of the Crown, would give her an opportunity. That's right, Nua Ayr didn't care about the last two skills of this skill. Instead, she had a soft spot for the first skill. Due to the different perspective, the skill that she wanted the most was the one that Luoya didn't care about the least. Under the effect of Afterglow of the Crown, she could casually project an image of Luoya once every 7 days. In addition, she could also visit the Akat family when she went to the Night Order. At most, they could meet up to 5 times a month. 5 times. This was much better than meeting once every few months. As a princess, Nua Ayr couldn't casually decide to marry him. At the very least, she had to wait until she reached adulthood. In other words, as long as she could keep an eye on him for a few years. Thinking so, the smile on Miss Angel's face deepened. On the other side, Luoya was still touched. The girl looked at this young man and suddenly felt a little guilty, but more than that, she felt a rising desire. Seriously? This expression of not doubting me at all was simply like a cute pet, making people want to pamper and bully it. Nua Ayr's face flushed red. Naturally, she couldn't hold Luoya in her arms in front of everyone. She could only try her best to control herself. The noisy environment in the hall covered her heavy breathing, so Luoya didn't notice anything strange. Look at those two children, their wings of light. Shia, what's going on? So beautiful. The pure white sparks floated like fireflies, and the two angels with their wings of light stood in the center of the sparks. This surreal scene was undoubtedly the first time anyone had ever seen such a scene. Both the nobles and the officials understood one thing. That is, they might have witnessed an incredible scene, perhaps even historic. The crowd was excited and began to guess what had happened. Onlookers never complained about big things, let alone the live broadcast of the royal family's news. Marquis Kadia, who was in the first row of the crowd, looked at the short blade of St. John and almost guessed the reason. However, before he could think of an explanation, St. John suddenly stood up and opened his mouth to speak nonsense. Everyone, this is Shiya's blessing. As soon as St. John jumped up and spoke, Kadia was stunned. Marquis Kadia stared with his eyes wide open and found that Luoya was also stunned. In front of everyone's eyes, St. John's face didn't turn red and he didn't pant. His face was as holy as if he had been enlightened by God. He waved his hand and pointed at the two children in front of him. This is Shiya's gift. The great mother goddess has recognized their oath. They are a pair blessed by Shiya. This is fate and God's will. Let us bless these two children. May they always maintain their original hearts. Oh! John of the Holy See defined the two of them in just a few sentences, and it immediately caused a huge commotion. The devout believers began to kneel down in joy, and the girls who were eager to gossip began to scream. The venue was in an uproar, and everyone's emotions were stirred up. Kadia looked at the scene that was almost out of control. He could only attribute St. John's actions to increase the cohesion of the church. He glanced sideways at the silver-haired girl who hadn't said a word since she came in and just stared at Her Royal Highness. For a moment he didn't know what to say. If it had been anyone else spouting this nonsense, Katia would have stood up and retorted for Elisa's sake. However, the one who was spouting this nonsense was the king of St. Maester Theocracy, John of the Holy See. No one present dared to say anything. Sorry, Lizzie, we'll have to bear with it for now. Kadia sighed. He could only make up his mind to help Lizzie in the future. As for now, he would just treat it as the darkest night before dawn. After all, the Holy Capital was Her Royal Highness's home ground. But it would be different if they returned to Akot Hill. No matter how powerful Noire was, could he chase her all the way to her house? Kadia shook his head and laughed. He looked forward. After the ceremony was completed, the sacred music of the Holy See began to play. Chapter 118. In the noisy hall, Luoya was busy farming. However, while he was in high spirits, the silent flames of war had been ignited on the other side. On the other side of the hall, two beautiful girls were silently looking at each other. Neither of them spoke, but the cold atmosphere made the people nearby feel that something was wrong. The noblewomen began to exchange information. There were quite a few people who had seen Elisa at the birthday banquet. Soon, the girl's identity became known to everyone. A group of noblewomen and young ladies began to look at her with fiery eyes. That child is Luoya-sama's adopted sister. That is to say, lower your voice. There is no evidence yet. What evidence do we need? Look at the atmosphere over there. I'm afraid Her Highness is in trouble. The noblewomen and bureaucrats watched the battle excitedly from a distance, as if they were witnessing a duel between two swordsmen at the top of the Forbidden City. On the other side, Katia glanced over and her expression changed. She hurried over to chat with John of the Holy See and the others. Lizzie, if you have something to say it quickly. Time is precious. It won't be good if he sees us. Noire glanced at Luoya, who was still busy on the other side. She looked at Lizzie in front of her and felt helpless. Lizzie's identity had its own difficulties. It made it difficult for Luoya to perceive the difference between family and love. However, it also had its own unique advantages. For example, if anyone wanted to get close to Luoya, it would be impossible for them to fall out with Lizzie. Noire didn't know if Luoya would be an exception, but she didn't want to try. It wasn't easy for her to get close to Luoya, and she didn't want to complicate things at this time. Miss Angel stared at Lizzie's red eyes and felt nervous. She was afraid that this child would make things difficult and make things too ugly. If that happened, it would be troublesome if Luoya noticed. However, it turned out that her worries were unnecessary. Greetings, Your Highness. I don't have any other intentions this time. I'm just here to greet you. It doesn't matter if my elder brother sees me. Is that so? If that's the case, then I welcome it. If our relationship is too stiff, it won't do us any good. Please be at ease. As long as Your Highness is still the power that protects Lord Big Brother, I will not unreasonably criticize you. After all, Lord Big Brother's safety is more important than anything else. I see. Upon hearing Lizzie's words, Noire's expression relaxed a little. She suddenly felt that Luoya's love for her wasn't without reason. This child still knew her priorities. Luoya might seem to be safe now, but there were still many pairs of eyes watching him. For example, the secret silver monastery that wanted to kill him because of his bloodline. There were many strange organizations like this that had a grudge with the Akot family. According to John of the Holy See, most of the awakened bloodline of the Akot family were short-lived. Generations of awakened bloodlines all died young. This curse had undoubtedly become a sore spot for the Noire. It seems like you value him a lot. Of course, I love Lord Big Brother. I can't tolerate any harm to him. The silver-haired girl covered her chest with her hand as she spoke. The expression on her face instantly melted into a smile. This warm smile was fleeting, but the irresistible charm made everyone's heart skip a beat. Before I can personally protect him, there's nothing wrong with letting you take his place. Take his place? You really dare to say that? Do you think you can surpass me in the future? Wait a minute. The blonde girl's expression changed halfway through her words. Her pair of blue eyes stared deeply at the girl in front of her. Her pupils couldn't help but flash with surprise. This feeling she was about to reach source level 5. How was this possible? She had seen AI Lizzie at Nua Ayer's birthday party. At that time, she was still an ordinary girl who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. In a short 2 months, she was already about to obtain source form? A chill ran down Nua Ayer's spine and she became vigilant. She narrowed her eyes as she looked at the girl who dared to provoke her. An unprecedented sense of danger rose in her heart. When it comes to protecting Lord Big Brother, of course it's up to whoever is more qualified to do it. Am I right, Your Highness? So that's how it is. I've really been looked down upon. Nua Ayer stepped forward with a smile on her face. Although she didn't release any curse energy, her entire aura suddenly became stronger. Take my place? Hee, if you can do it, then try. I'll let you understand the difference in strength. The two of them looked at each other, the flames in their hearts silently igniting. AI Lizzie had found a target worth surpassing, while Nua Ayer felt the urgency of being chased. The two most talented girls in the theocracy had been stimulated by a single person just like that. As a result, there were 3 sets of flames in the hall. Luo Ayer's side was the most popular. Countless nobles and officials shook his hand and thanked him profusely. Nua Ayer's side was full of fighting spirit. The 2 girls refused to back down under the crowd of women. As for the third, it was Kadia. Chapter 119. Can't go back? Father, what do you mean? Luoya listened to Kadia's words and was stunned for a moment. Obviously, he did not understand the meaning of this sentence. The murderous aura is so strong. Why does it have the smell of, I won't let you out of this door today, after the failure of a gang negotiation? What's the situation? The royal family arranged 300 axemen nearby? It doesn't make sense. Perhaps seeing Luo Ya's strange expression, the Marquis hurriedly added another sentence. It's work. Something happened in the military, so I probably can't go home with you. That's what I mean. So that's what you mean. Father, can you not scare me? Wait, did you just get the news? Well, Prince Kai-in just informed a few of our senior members of the Knights. After the banquet, the officials of the military will probably have to stay. Kadia sighed and was obviously worried. Luoya heard this and suddenly felt that things were not good. No matter what, it was still during the banquet, and the main character was Nua Ayer at the St. Cecil Hall. Needless to say, it was even bigger than a birthday banquet. What kind of urgent matter needed to be communicated at this kind of banquet? And speaking of the military will have to stay. Luoya looked back at the number of people wearing military uniforms coming and going in the hall. There were at least 100 people. If all of them stayed, it would be too big of a commotion. Father, is it convenient to say what's the matter? Luoya asked Kadia in a low voice. The Marquis hesitated and sighed. Forget it. Anyway, you will know later. Signs of mutants have been found in the security area of Tuck Fortress. What? Mutants? Lower your voice. Before Luo Ya's words came out, Kadia reached out and covered his mouth. The father and son glanced around and were relieved when they found that no one was paying attention. This is confidential military information. It hasn't been announced yet because of fear of causing panic. Don't talk nonsense. I understand, but isn't this a little too big? Luo Ya swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His heartbeat sped up when he heard the news. Traces of the mutants. These few words didn't seem like much, but to those who had some military knowledge, it was like a bolt from the blue. The reason was that this wasn't like hunting. Even if you saw the traces of the mutants, you might not necessarily see them. Once you found the traces of the mutants, it was basically a prelude to war. There was a saying at the border that there were only 2 kinds of mutants. One was that there were none, and the other was that they were everywhere. The Great Migration at the end of the Second Era was no joke. It was a journey that was measured in years. They had to travel such a long distance before they found this paradise. Then, the question was, the mutants had traveled such a long distance to the current human world. Could they be here for a vacation? Since the cost of investment was high, the desire for results was naturally high. It was the same for the mutants. Therefore, every time they discovered traces of these mutants, there was basically no peace. they would definitely try to attack the humans. Counting the years, it had been more than 80 years since the mutants last invaded the West. From a historical perspective, it was not that long ago. Why did they suddenly appear again? Luoya, calm down. Although this is a serious matter, it might not be the worst. Dia patted the nervous young man's shoulder and explained the current situation from a professional's point of view. Luoya relaxed a little after hearing this. It turned out that there were many such cases in history. The two fortresses in the east of the human world would encounter such situations every few decades. However, most of the time, the mutants who came were not strong enough and were forced to retreat. The famous 4 invasions to the west were actually cases of failed defense. As long as it can be defended, it is not a big deal. The people will not know about it. This should be the case this time. Is that so? That's good. Luoya looked at Dia, who was still calm, and let out a sigh of relief. As a family member of a soldier, the possible war was a small-scale defensive battle. This kind of news made him feel a lot more at ease. Well, don't worry too much. Maintain a good mood. You are the main character of this banquet. Dia patted Luoya's back and urged him to quickly return. The black-haired young man's face showed a difficult expression. It's too difficult to pretend that I didn't hear about it. After sighing and adjusting for a while, Luoya squeezed out a smile on his face. He raised his head and puffed out his chest as he walked towards the new heir. When the princess saw him, she immediately walked a few steps forward. Asking Dia to retreat at this time was simply a fool's dream, and it would also damage his reputation. Sometimes, nobles even valued their reputation more than their lives. As a son, Luoya naturally could not do anything that would ruin his father's reputation. But I think it's wrong to completely ignore our children. We should at least listen to your opinion on this matter. Lizzie was still trying her best with tears in her eyes. No matter what, she could not ignore Luoya, who was part of the family when it came to reorganizing the family. Furthermore, Luoya was the only child. If Dia remarried and had the intention of having a second child, then Luoya's advantage as an only child would disappear. Losing the identity of an only child, Dia being deceived by a vixen, Luoya losing the right to inherit the family. This long series of plot lines formed in Lizzie's mind in just a few seconds, and it made her even more uneasy. I must not let something like this happen to Big Brother. Lizzie clenched her small fists as she thought so, and her entire person became resolute. Big Brother, if it's not convenient for you to say it, then how about I do it? You do it? Yes, leave it to me to make father change his mind. The silver-haired girl looked resolutely at Luoya's golden eyes. Luoya blinked and could not help but ponder. Wait, if Lizzie were to say it, the effect would be better than if I were to say it? After all, Dia was her guardian, and he promised to take good care of her. Although it was impossible to make Dia completely give up on the idea of going to the battlefield, even if he could only retreat to the second line of logistics, it would be much better than going to the eastern border and starving. Thinking of this, Luoya nodded slightly, and his eyes gradually brightened. Lizzie, then I'll leave this matter to you. Don't worry, do it boldly. Whether it succeeds or not, I won't blame you. Yes, I understand. Lizzie clenched her fists, feeling that she had understood the essence of the matter. Luoya's eyes also lit up, and it was obvious that he had high hopes for her. In this situation of mutual trust, the two finished their dinner and began to read in the study while waiting for Dia to return home. Chapter 121. On the second day after Luoya was granted the position of acting overlord, Dia left. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses are mobilized, the army's supply line has always been the most important part of military operations. Although the route used to send supplies to the eastern Tark fortress was still there, it was only suitable for the current situation. After the appearance of the mutants, according to the agreement, the various countries would increase the number of troops to defend the area they were in charge of. It was inevitable that the population of the eastern border would skyrocket. Under such circumstances, the daily transportation volume would increase by more than 10 times. Simply put, after a few decades, the human countries needed to build roads again, and this road was quite long. But fortunately, there was a foundation left behind before, so strictly speaking, it was only building roads. This task undoubtedly fell on the head of the logistics department. As the head of the logistics department, Dia had to personally go to the site to inspect, and was also the first batch of soldiers to leave the army. After waving goodbye to Dia at the door in the morning, Luoya looked at his father and the soldiers who left with a serious face and sighed. Although Luoya had discussed the issue of the territory with Dia several times, he had never thought of being an acting overlord. In the end, managing a department and managing all the departments were two completely different concepts, and the many complicated matters were enough to give him a headache. But fortunately, Dia still had a sense of law. Yesterday, he had drafted a power of attorney and had the palace notarize it overnight. As long as there was this thing, Luoya wouldn't be considered as taking up the post without a certificate. But in the entire theocracy, there weren't many people who dared to investigate him, so this thing was at most icing on the cake. After Dia left, Luoya and Ai Lizi also began to prepare to return to the territory. Thinking of this, Luoya felt very convinced. It had been almost 3 months since Nua Ayer's birthday party last year, and Akate territory had been idling without anyone, but everything was still as usual. As expected of an ancestor who had thrown his responsibilities to the wind. He had completely turned into a feudal lord. For the entire day, Luoya and Ai Lizi were thinking about what to bring and what to purchase. After all, the Saint capital was the most prosperous place in Saint Mestre, and there were some things that couldn't be bought elsewhere. Usually, nobles would greet their friends before leaving and even meet up with them. However, Luoya and Ai Lizi didn't need to do so. At most, they would send someone to inform the palace. Then, before noon, the person who informed them came back. However, he didn't come back on his own. Instead, he came back with a large number of guards and the royal family's carriage. Alright, to a certain extent, Luoya had already guessed that this might be the case, so she wasn't too surprised. Ai Lizi's little face, on the other hand, puffed up. But as a noble, she knew that it was a friendly gesture for her to pay a visit before she left, so she could only pinch her nose and acquiesce to the vixen's arrival. If that's the case, are you leaving tomorrow? In the living room, Nua Ayer looked at the siblings sitting opposite her and sighed. Naturally, she couldn't bear to part with Luoya. However, Ai Lizi was also an interesting person. As a competitor, she felt a sense of crisis. If the conditions allowed, Nua Ayer would like to compete with this child. Losing both her lover and her competitor meant that the life of the princess would once again become dull and dull. To be honest, Nua Ayer wasn't too happy. However, she also knew how important a territory was to a noble, so naturally, she couldn't say anything to dissuade them. Of course, this was because Nua Ayer didn't know about the great achievements of the Akate territory's governance. She didn't know that there was such a big noble family in the world who didn't care about anything. Otherwise, she might have really made them stay for another 2 months. You should already know about the military situation, right? The mutants? Yes, I heard from my father. Uncle Dia should have already left, right? He left early this morning. I am now the acting lord, so it is reasonable for me to return to the territory as soon as possible. Nua Ayer understood Luoya's answer. However, after glancing at Ai Lizi, Miss Angel decisively stated her request. You can go back, but you have to write to me. Write to me? Yes, I am your protector. It is my duty to understand your situation. Let me think, 1 letter a week. Nua Ayer smiled and said the communication frequency, which immediately caused Ai Lizi to be dissatisfied. Your Highness, not to mention how useful writing letters can be in protecting Brother Luoya, 1 letter a week is too frequent, right? Brother is busy as the acting lord. I don't think it is good to add to his burden. I don't think it is a burden to write to me. In fact, this is the first time I have asked someone to write to me. Luoya, do you hate it? No, I don't mean that. Facing the princess who looked as if her pride was hurt, Luoya hurriedly waved her hand to deny it. Nua Ayer smirked and once again confronted Ai Lizi. Miss Ai Lizi, although you are Luoya's adopted sister, that doesn't mean you can represent him. Who knows, Maybe the things you hate are the things he likes the most. Hee hee, your highness really knows how to joke? I know brother very well, more than anyone else. Sometimes, it is the other person's wishful thinking. Luo Ye looked at the two who were staring at each other without backing down. She silently lowered her head and turned into a stone statue. She followed the three-nose principle of not speaking, not moving, and not looking. Chapter 122. One day later, in the evening, in front of the convoy with the Akkad family emblem, there was chaos at this time. On the plains outside the official road, a group of strange animals were running across the official road. It was a kind of four-legged animal similar to a sheep with two horns on its head. Its fur was white with gold, and its cry was a bit like a deer. It was very flexible when it ran. Its name was Golden Lamb. It was a famous monster that represented luck in Xia. It was also an animal whose whole body was priceless. Although Golden Lamb had gold in its name, there was actually no gold in its shining wool. The gold referred to its value after being sold. The fur of a golden lamb was equivalent to a gold coin of the same weight. This was a famous illusion in the past. Needless to say, the ornamental value of the golden wool had always been the highest level raw material for luxurious clothes of the noblewomen. It had always been in short supply. Saint Mestre was still fine. In the Austin Empire, people believed that wearing clothes made of golden wool would bring good luck. Clothes with a little golden wool were more than twice as expensive as other clothes. In addition to the wool, the horn of the golden lamb was also a rare curse material. Its head could be used as an ornament, and its meat was famous for being delicious. It had always been in the top 3 in the rankings of famous chefs, but it was not easy to catch. In short, it was a treasure. Such an animal suddenly passed by in front of people. In the eyes of people, it was almost the same as a pile of gold coins jumping there. Luo Ye knew the moment he saw the golden lamb that the opportunity had come. The black-haired boy looked at the soldiers who were ready to move but restrained because of discipline. He knew that the time to show his leadership and strength had come. He opened the door and looked into the distance, then he ordered loudly, "Captain, come out." After the order was issued, the Akkad military officer and the captain of the royal guards walked out of the crowd. Under Luo Ye's inquiry, they explained the characteristics of this monster in a few words. It turned out that one of the main reasons why these golden lambs were not easy to catch was because their wool was very unique. It was fine for slashing and cutting, but it was extremely resistant to arrows and piercing damage. It was almost impossible to kill it. If one wanted to kill it, they would have to chase after it and hack it to death. Their combat strength was not very high, and a source rank 6 would be able to take down one by themselves. As soon as Luo Ye heard that they needed to chase after the sheep, he immediately mounted his horse. Under the golden afterglow of the setting sun, a group of armored soldiers began to chase after the sheep. Unfortunately, the speed of a horse carrying a person was not great. They chased after the sheep all the way to the edge of the forest, but they still could not catch up. The soldiers could not help but become anxious. It was fine if they didn't see it, but even if they did, how could they let these gold coins and good ingredients run away? The commander of the Akkad private army, Duke, was anxious. He was already considering whether or not to dismount and try to chase after the sheep. After all, Duke was a source rank 4. Not to mention the long distance, it was still very easy for him to sprint faster than a horse. However, before the commander of the army could make up his mind, the running people found something strange. A powerful spell suddenly appeared in the team. When the soldiers felt it, they turned around and saw the young master Luo Ye, who they were supposed to protect, flying over their heads like a cannonball. At this time, Luo Ye's body was wrapped in white light. He held a silver blade in his hand, and a pair of wings of light appeared on his shoulders. After soaring into the sky and flying at high speed for a while, the black-haired young man fell to the ground like a meteor. With a loud bang, he smashed into the edge of the forest in front of the golden lambs. In the smoke screen, a terrifying aura rolled out, and a huge and terrifying shadow suddenly appeared in the sky where the light and darkness met. At this moment, the running golden lambs stopped as if they were collectively immobilized. They trembled under the gaze of the shadow. Those who were in a better state curled up on the ground, and those who weren't in a good state directly fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Of course, this powerful deterrence didn't only affect the monsters. The horses of the knights also stopped at the same time. There was a burst of people shouting and horses neighing, and some even began to run back in fright. Not good, we accidentally hurt our allies. That's enough, Gulendare. Well, these little things really can't be scared. Glancing at the knights who were in a hurry in the distance, the shadow of the Gulendare finally faded away. The huge skeleton didn't leave. It began to look at the soldiers and Luoya and began to talk about the animals of his time. Although the horses of my time weren't big, they were all quite good-looking. They could even grow horns on their heads. They were much better than these. Big brother, you're talking about unicorns, right? Luoya rubbed his chin as he listened to the words of the Gulendare. He felt that there were only two possibilities for a horse that wasn't afraid of a giant. It was either the king of horses or the retard of horses. The black-haired young man listened to the rambling of the lonely giant. On the other hand, the soldiers on the other side were terrified. The pressure of the Gulendare was too strong. Not to mention these animals, even humans would have a great deal of fear. And the deeper one's understanding of supernatural power, the more they would feel the terror. The commander of the Akit private army, Duke, took 2 deep breaths. He looked at the pale faces of the royal guards and realized that their young master wasn't simple. The soldiers didn't understand the terrifying aura just now, but they could see further. That was an ancient existence that was difficult to understand and approach. It was a monster that made them unable to even think of resisting. Duke didn't know how Luoya controlled such an existence, but there was no doubt that this was an unimaginably strong force. Even the current Marquis Ka Dia didn't make Duke feel so powerless. Luoya, as the future heir of the territory, was able to reach such a level at such a young age. This future achievement. Thinking until here, Duke reacted. He looked at Luoya, who reappeared in the smoke, and hurriedly ordered the stiff soldiers. What are you waiting for? It's rare for the young master to make a move personally. Hurry up and catch the sheep. Sit. Chapter 123. Under a hill beside the official road, Duke and the others were setting up camp. Because of the last-minute hunt, the speed of Luoya's convoy was greatly slowed down. If they wanted to get to the town to rest, they would have to march through the night. For the Akat private army and palace guards who prioritized the safety of Luoya and Ai Lizi, this was too risky. Being ambushed at night was no joke. Many important people had failed miserably at night. Even if Duke had full confidence in his subordinates and palace guards, he didn't want to take unnecessary risks. Also, the current atmosphere wasn't suitable for marching. How many sheep are we going to kill? There are so many of us, we can't possibly eat all of them, right? Originally, the chefs wanted to kill 3, but the young master said that it wasn't enough to reward the whole army, so he added 2 more. Really? Shia bless Lord Luoya. A few soldiers who were skillfully building the barracks chatted happily, looking forward to the delicious food in the story. This was also the current atmosphere of the entire camp. The excited soldiers had smiles on their faces, the campfire was being prepared, the servants were preparing chairs for Luoya and Ai Lizi, and the chefs were working hard to harvest the wool of the golden lambs that were already slaughtered by the soldiers. Brother Luoya, the wool of these sheep is very precious. Should we try to raise them? We can't do that. I've asked, after the golden lambs lose their wool, they will sense danger and speed up the process of mutation. Soon after, they will turn into a ferocious fawn. At that time, not only will they have no wool, their meat will also become hard. I see, no wonder the golden wool is so rare. It turns out that each sheep can only be harvested once. Yes, our hunt this time can be considered to have removed the hidden danger of monsters nearby. Otherwise, it would be difficult to deal with these sheep when they grow up. Luoya looked at the worker who was harvesting the sheep's wool. He felt that he had really gained both fame and fortune. Ai Lizi nodded her little head and looked at the young man beside her thoughtfully. Luoya and the others had chased after them for a long distance, so Ai Lizi didn't sense the power of the Gulendare. However, this didn't mean that she didn't notice anything strange. Ai Lizi saw the reverence in the eyes of the returning soldiers, Duke's warm attitude, and the subservient attitude of the palace guards. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. He heard that these sheep were stopped by Brother Luoya. It seemed that Brother Luoya had become a lot stronger recently. AI Lizzie thought back to a few months ago. At that time, Luoya was only at source grade 6. It was impossible for him to be admired by this group of elite soldiers above source grade 5. Brother Luoya never told me about supernatural powers. AI Lizzie thought about this inside. Because she hid the fact that she cultivated supernatural powers, Luoya had always treated her as a weak and ordinary girl. Although this allowed her to enjoy her brother's love, it also made it difficult for AI Lizzie to recognize Luoya's strength. He shouldn't be at source grade 4, right? AI Lizzie thought with a little guilty conscience. She already knew that Duke was at source grade 4 from Kadia. This military officer was serious and valued strength the most. Now that Duke was acting so respectfully, perhaps Luoya really was. Lizzie started to think that other people's supernatural powers were rising at the same speed as her own. She started to make baseless guesses and felt that she was too lazy. I still have to work hard. The silver-haired girl clenched her small fist. She was determined to protect Luoya. She felt that she had to catch up to her brother's footsteps. Moreover, considering Nua Iyer, the situation was even more urgent. AI Lizzie's journey of cheating sped up again. Luoya was watching the Akit family's chef's work. Of the 5 lambs that were slaughtered on the spot, 4 were roasted whole lambs, and the caramel reaction was used to produce the most delicious taste. The remaining 1 was used to stew soup with the mountain delicacies that the soldiers collected from nearby. The soldiers who were given the task of collecting the herbs had high morale. They had been outside for many years and were very clear about which wild plants were edible and which were tasty. They dug around in the forest and dug out many good things. Luoya looked at the mountain of mountain herbs and felt that Akit should develop this area. For example, in his previous life, Luoya's White Mountain, Old Ginseng was a key area for a period of time. While Luoya, who saw everything as gold coins, was thinking, the other side had already started cooking. Not long after the 4 golden lambs were placed on the fire, a thick fragrance began to spread in the camp. Duke saw this and hurriedly increased the number of soldiers on duty, worried that the delicious food would attract wild beasts. After a busy period, the sun had completely set and the celebration feast began. Luoya and AI Lizzie enjoyed 1 golden lamb alone. The other 3 were left for the soldiers and officers in the camp. But in reality, with Luoya and AI Lizzie's appetite, they could only eat a few pieces of meat cut from the good parts. The rest would be given to the soldiers. Roasted whole lamb was not a delicate dish. The secret of the delicious taste was the quality of the ingredients. The golden lamb could be said to be the best in this aspect. The fat was evenly distributed, the meat was juicy, and the texture melted in the mouth. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. When eating, one had to look at the food and the atmosphere. Although the environment in the wilderness was not elegant enough, the smoke rising from the plains had a unique charm. The sound of laughter echoed in the ears. It was different from the exquisite banquets of the nobles, but it had a free and happy atmosphere. Brother, don't you need some wine to relieve your boredom? No, no one drinks. I am no exception. Chapter 124. Someone from Sorofia is here, and we need to inform him? Beside the campfire, Luoya looked at the confused Duke, his small eyes filled with doubt. What's going on? Why would Sorofia suddenly appear? And to inform him once someone arrives, could it be Kadia also took out loans when he was young? Saint Mestre's king of moneylenders, Luoya, suddenly felt a chill down his spine. It wasn't that Luoya was maliciously speculating about his father, but there were too many nobles who did this. Developing a territory usually required a large amount of funds, and the amount would depend on the scale of the development. However, it was obvious that most of the nobles wouldn't pay the full amount out of their own pockets. It was just like buying a house. There were people who paid the full amount, but that was only because they were rich and overbearing. Most of them would pay the down payment first, and then slowly work their way up. In Luoya's previous life, the financial institution was a bank, but in this world, it was a merchant association. Generally speaking, before developing a territory, the feudal lord would contact the local merchant association, and the merchant association would set the interest rate and pay a portion of the money. The territory would pay a portion of the money back every year, and it would take a few years or even a few decades to pay off the debt. Of course, this was only the simplest model. In reality, there were many things that could be discussed during the negotiations. For example, most feudal lords wanted the merchant association to be in charge of the logistics of the development of the territory. The nobles didn't know where the most durable tools were, so the merchant association had to send out experienced merchants to purchase them. The merchant association would also accept missions in exchange for some benefits and convenience, turning into a red-top merchant for a while. Generally speaking, developing a territory together with the merchant association was a mutually beneficial matter. However, as the saying goes, the greater the profit, the greater the risk. If the development failed, it would be a heavy blow to the noble family and the merchant association. As the largest merchant association in Shia, the Sorofia Merchant Association had developed countless territories together with the local feudal lords. Of course, there were some that succeeded, but there were a few that failed, and the feudal lords owed Sorofia a huge debt. Could it be that his father had done some development when he was young, or that one of his ancestors had done some work and owed money to Sorofia, the head of the capitalists, and was now being asked to repay the debt? Luo Ye's face turned green when he thought of this possibility. Damn it, he had already shouldered a debt of 500,000 yuan. If he had to repay his father's debt, then Luo Ye might as well sell himself to Nuo Iyer as a pet. Did our territory engage in any large-scale development projects in the past? The black-haired young man carefully asked Duke. The middle-aged man blinked his eyes and smiled, which was a rare sight. Young master, look at what you're saying. We are Akkad territory. How could we possibly engage in territorial development? What the hell? You're quite proud, aren't you? Luo Ye looked at Duke, who had an expression that said, "Young master, you're thinking too much." He suddenly felt that his ancestors were really something else. They could actually cultivate the pride of not developing their territory. How the hell did they do it? The young man rubbed his temples as he thought of this. He suddenly felt that it was a mistake for Heathcliff to give so much land to the Akkad family 1,000 years ago. Perhaps the royal family didn't expect this at that time. The Akkad family had generations of ambitious young men who would rather die than inherit their family's billions of assets. After generations, the billions of assets were about to grow, and the Akkad family was still keen on fighting. After silently complaining in his heart for a while, Luo Ye finally felt relieved. There shouldn't be any money owed to Sorofia. Then it's fine. Although Sorofia was powerful, the Akkad family wasn't bad either. The 5 grass-head kings of the theocracy weren't just for show. Sorofia might be a strong dragon in other places, but in Akkad territory, he really couldn't beat the local snake. Thinking of this, Luo Ye's confidence swelled. He was most afraid that he was in the wrong. As long as he didn't sign any contract with Sorofia, Luo Ye could ignore them. Besides, Luo Ye had sold them a high-quality requiem lamp before. Strictly speaking, he had formed a good relationship with Sorofia, so he should be thanking him. But speaking of Sorofia, I remember that in the game, the black-haired young man whispered in a low voice, and the figure of a girl with reddish-brown hair and emerald pupils appeared in his mind. Xia Luot Sorofia, the eldest daughter of the Sorofia family, and also one of the 4 female protagonists of the game Eye of the Recorder. Luo Ye's memory of the game was a bit blurry, and he didn't have much impression of this woman. He only remembered that she was a cold beauty. Xia Luot's coldness was different from Ai Lizi's. Ai Lizi's coldness was a kind of cold and arrogant temperament, while Xia Luot's coldness was her attitude towards people. She wasn't exactly at 3-nothingness, and it wasn't the kind of coldness that was targeted at someone. Instead, it was a natural personality that kept people at arm's length. In other words, Charlotte was a girl who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. The Sorofia family had a strange personality that seemed to be inherited from their family. They were especially stubborn, and they clearly distinguished between love and hate. This could be seen from their family history. As long as it was something they hated, Even if it was a colossus like the Austin Empire, they would fight to the death. But if it was something they liked or loved, then they would show extraordinary friendliness. Xia Luo could be said to have a typical family personality. She wouldn't hesitate to use any means to suppress those she hated, but she was willing to give up almost anything for those she liked. To be honest, Luo Ye didn't want to have any contact with this woman. The main reason was that Luo Ye didn't dare to guarantee that he could break through her hard shell and enter her heart. If that happened, it would be too difficult for him to turn things around. On the other hand, among the 4 female protagonists who ganged up on Luo Ye in the game, Xia Luo did the least. She didn't even make a move. Luo Ye didn't know why, but from this fact, the conflict between the two didn't seem to be that big. So it was fine to leave her alone. Forget it, I'll just ignore her. Anyway, she doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. I'm very busy. Elder brother, what have you been talking about since the beginning? Chapter 125. 1 month later, Akat territory. Early in the morning, a beautifully decorated carriage slowly came from the end of the street. The logo on the carriage was somewhat unique. It was a strange pattern of an eye above a candle flame. If it was in a foreign country, it would probably be regarded as the symbol of a cult. However, in Akat territory, this symbol was already known to everyone. At least in this month, its popularity had greatly increased. Of course, along with the candle flame symbol, there was another name, Luo Ye in Akat. The current acting lord of Akat territory, the young master of the Marquis Mansion. For some unknown reason, he completely grasped the power of the territory and was now the #1 person in the Akat territory's government. It was admittedly good to have so many resounding titles, but when these titles were placed on the head of a 10-year-old child, the world's doubts would fill the sky and earth. Even though many officials didn't say anything, they still had some objections to Marquis Kadia's decision. One must know that Marquis Kadia was a well-known figure in the theocracy. No matter where he went, his name was well known. Although he was a little weak in governing the territory, he was still a big tree. Under the big tree, it was cool to enjoy the shade. The resistance to change and the nostalgia to beautify the past could be said to be a common human behavior. When Luo Ye first took office, his support among the people was actually quite low. However, no one expected that this situation would quickly change in just a short month. The carriage wheels turned and arrived at the entrance of the territory's government office. The door opened, the coachman placed the ladder, and the beautiful maid got off the carriage first and stood respectfully by the side. This scene had become a daily routine for the nearby residents in the past month, and it also became the focus of everyone's attention. When the black-haired youth's figure walked out of the carriage, and the moment his handsome and tender cheeks appeared, many passers-by stopped to look. The young girls who saw Luo Ye for the first time let out a short cry, and the women living nearby couldn't help but take a few more glances. Oh, he's so good-looking. This was what most people were thinking at this moment. As he grew older, Luo Ye's achievements in the field of facial recognition were getting higher and higher. There were almost no flaws in his image, and humans were creatures that were dominated by vision to a certain extent. Luo Ye's popularity soared like a rocket as the number of times she appeared in public increased. Every evening, more and more young girls pretended to pass by on the streets. Some of them even rented houses nearby. Luo Ye was actually quite helpless against these users who only cared about appearances. These groups of fans reminded him of some bad things from his previous life. Fortunately, these people were more rational. Come to think of it, Noir seemed to be in the same situation as well. In fact, it was even more serious than Luo Ye. After all, the royal family had always been the center of gossip, be it in the previous life or the present. Thinking of this, Luo Ye felt a little more comfortable. After getting off the carriage, he looked around. Many people around him saluted him, and Luo Ye nodded his head in greeting. As it turned out, Luo Ye could rely on his face to make a living. However, how could he, who had great ambitions to clean up the mess left by his ancestors, do that? A lot of debt constantly urged him to improve, telling him that if he wanted to make a living, he had to rely on his talent. A month ago, when Luo Ye took over the power of the territory, the first thing he thought about was how to unite the people. During the transition between the old and the new, The officials lacked a sense of identity with the new leader. The civilians didn't care about politics and didn't know about the new leader. This was a very common phenomenon before the mass media coverage. Luo Ye's situation was especially serious because of his age. Expanding his influence became his priority, and he had to do it quickly. Speed was the most important thing in war. At such a critical moment, Luo Ye naturally couldn't be careless. Without saying a word, he took out 3 axes. The first one was to rectify the law and order. Although the Achaite territory had the best law and order among the 5 noble families, it was actually referring to the overall environment. Most of the judgments were based on the number of bandits in the territory, whether the roads were smooth and safe, and other factors that were beneficial to the merchants. However, for the citizens of Achaite City, some of the evildoers were more harmful to their lives. Petty thieves, ruffians, gangsters, loan sharks, and even human traffickers. These were the mountains that pressed down on the citizens. They often had a negative or even irreversible impact on their normal lives. Luo Ye, who had seen a lot of these evil forces in his previous life, hated them to the core. He was determined not to allow such vermin to run rampant in his territory. Thus, the slogan "Eliminate Evil," which had never appeared in the theocracy before, was launched with Luo Ye's strong support. Luo Ye carefully selected the law enforcement officers. Luo Ye didn't touch the city guards and the militia. On one hand, he was afraid that they would collude with the local evil forces. On the other hand, he was worried that they weren't strong enough. Luo Ye, who had seen a lot of extraordinaries, had a little side effect recently. He estimated the strength of his opponents as high as possible. In addition, this was a special period, so he was really cautious to the extreme. Under such guidance, Luo Ye only had one choice left. That was the most loyal people, the Achaite private army and the palace guards who would escort him. Thus, Duke, who was at source grade 4, personally took the lead. All of them were at source grade 5. As a local, Duke's sources of information were too wide. The first time he worked for Luo Ye, he was even more enthusiastic. In less than a week, he sent over a list of 100 people. The crimes on the list were roughly divided into 3 categories. The first category was people who committed murder and human traffickers. The second category was people who hurt people and indirectly caused the destruction of people's families. The third category was people who robbed, extorted, stole, and fled the city. For this list, Luo Ye first demanded that the evidence must be conclusive. He couldn't be biased. After ensuring that the list was correct, he immediately ordered a heavy strike. First of all, the human traffickers had to be killed, especially those who abducted children. Luo Ye's guidelines for these kinds of criminals were to hang them all. Not a single one was left alive. Logically speaking, the prison wasn't a place where just any trash could live. In any case, it was taxpayers' money. Some of the more vicious criminals were directly sent to Xixia. As a grass-headed emperor, every lord had the right to change the laws in their territory. Before Luo Ye took action, he specifically changed the laws in this area. These evil forces would be dealt with severely. He was determined not to let them cause any more harm to the victims or retaliate against the informants. Under such a thunderous method, in just a short period of 10 days, the major gangs in Achaite City were all toppled. The loan sharks were arrested while fleeing, and the human traffickers were all caught. One after another, the hidden criminals were so scared that they lined up to surrender. They were afraid that they would be killed by Duke's troops. That's right, because Duke's troops were all youths from the military, most of them had a strong sense of justice and a strong murderous aura. In addition to Luo Ye's orders, this group of source grade 5 enforcers would often be filled with righteous indignation when they saw criminals in the middle of a crime. Some of them were even killed on the spot. It had to be said that although these killing gods didn't follow the rules, the deterrence effect was too strong. Now, when the ruffians on the streets saw the Achaite family's military uniform, their legs would go soft and they would tremble. Those who were timid would easily pee their pants. Chapter 126. So back to the old question, how do you gather the people's hearts? There was a saying in ancient times that whoever wins the hearts of the people wins the world. So for this difficult question, Luo Ye actually cheated. He had a wealth of knowledge that was different from this era. Putting aside the thousands of years of history of the Celestial Empire, Luo Ye, who was illuminated by the red star in his previous life, was very familiar with the topic of uniting the people. How to unite? To serve the people. The eyes of the people were bright. Whether a lord was good or bad, mediocre or incompetent, they could see all of these. Luo Ye was born a noble in this life, so it was impossible for him to walk among the people, but it was still possible for him to walk among the people. Although the special campaign against evil was a loss, and the Akkad family even paid a sum of money to compensate the victims, it was in exchange for prestige and the people's hearts, which were difficult to buy with money. On the other hand, it also united Luo Ye's team. During the campaign, the finance department, the publicity department, and the special task force worked closely together. These officials who originally served Kadia were gradually familiar with Luo Ye, and they also had a preliminary sense of honor. Duke was very happy during the celebration. He was happy not only because he completed the mission, but also because he had the honor of upholding justice for the village. He gained a good reputation, and he was proud to work under Luo Ye. The same was true for the young people in the team. These people were loved by the people, and this was reflected in many aspects. Perhaps it was because they didn't need to pay for groceries, or perhaps it was because they were respected on the streets, but more than that, they were confessed to. That's right, this team quickly got rid of their single status in the process of serving the people. Some of them were even heroes saving beauties, and as their boss, Luo Ye, naturally didn't escape. He wasn't only watched by young girls, but in fact, the government building received more than 10 confession letters every day, and there were even daughters of officials who wanted to be his concubine. Of course, these requests were all rejected by Luo Ye with the reason that Kadia wasn't here. Luo Ye strolled into the Akkad territory's government mansion and entered the lord's room. Leaning on the soft leather chair, he looked out of the window and sighed in relief. The first of the three-pronged policies was undoubtedly very effective and could be considered a good start. After that, Luo Ye's second and third-pronged policies followed. The Akkad Territory Road Preparation Plan was a project that Luo Ye and the relevant staff had worked out over a period of several years. The goal was to open up the various villages and towns in Akkad Territory and build a transportation network, thus laying the foundation for future development. To put it bluntly, it was infrastructure. If you want to get rich, you have to build roads first. This sentence was sufficient proof of the importance that the Celestial Empire placed on infrastructure. Luo Ye, as an upright citizen of the Celestial Empire in his previous life, could be said to have been greatly affected. How could he talk about development if he couldn't even take a proper path? One must know that whether it was military or commercial operations, a good road was the main prerequisite. The last road preparation in Akkad territory was a few decades ago when Kadia just took office. Now, it had been in disrepair for a long time and some places were impassable due to the rolling rocks. Of course, even though building roads was good, it was a huge project that required a lot of investment. Originally, Luo Ye wanted to seek financing from the Chamber of Commerce, but after looking at the pile of debt in his system, Luo Ye decided to leave a path for himself in the future. When he started, he would borrow as little as possible. In fact, even without the Chamber of Commerce, Luo Ye could do it alone because he could save a lot of money. Milton's Path of Nature. Forrest Fairy Milton's research on the combination of nature and civilization. After cutting wood, it can produce wooden bricks that are as strong as rocks. When buried in the ground, they will take root and sprout. The wood elves still exist, but in a different way. Milton's Sessions, Price. 30,000 points/stick, Acting Lord Memorial Event. 1,000 years of accumulation will give birth to precious wealth. 1,000 years of neglect will cause the territory to stagnate. Only wealth and prosperity can resist the butcher's knife of the enemy. 50% off. Milton's Path of Nature, Price. 10,000 points/stick. When Luo Ye saw the discounted items in the event area, it could be said that he instantly listed Milton's Path of Nature as a must-buy. All the other daily necessities paled in comparison. In ancient times, the cost of road construction was mainly concentrated in two aspects. One was manpower, which was unavoidable, and the other was the cost of the road itself. There were several types of roads. The worst wild road only needed to be compacted, but it was prone to weeds. Slightly better roads required soil frying. Better stone roads required large amounts of raw stones to be cut. On the other hand, brick roads required a higher cost because they needed to be refined and transported in a unified manner. The basic cost of refining the bricks, the fuel consumed during the firing, and the transportation after the firing. All of these added up to a huge sum of money. But with Milton's path of nature, all these could be saved. This item with a strange name was actually a set of tools that was enchanted with the forest fairy's exclusive curse. When wood was placed into the tool, it would produce wooden blocks that would increase in hardness. After being buried in the ground, it would take root like a tree. It was simply a divine tool for infrastructure in the mountainous forests. When Luoya first saw this item, he had doubts. What if it caught fire? But after testing it, Luoya realized that he was overthinking. This, Milton's path of nature, absorbed water and released water when it was on fire. It was harder to ignite than ordinary roads. Chapter 127. 2 years later. Rose Commercial United Nations, Rose City. In a classic office, a brown-haired middle-aged man sat behind a desk. In the middle of the room stood a girl with reddish-brown hair and emerald pupils. The man's name was Brosnan and the girl's name was Xiaolu. The two of them were the most famous father and daughter in the entire Rose. Everyone knew about their deep relationship. But now, the atmosphere in the room was different from usual. It was full of strangeness. "Father, why did you call me here all of a sudden?" The brown-haired girl sitting in front of the desk stared at the man in front of her curiously. She didn't know what was wrong with her usually resolute father. Xia Luo was puzzled because she was called back from the fringe by Brosnan using an urgent family letter. Normally, such a letter meant that something big had happened in the family. But when Xia Luo finally got home, Brosnan only asked about some trivial matters. It had been more than half an hour since then. Faced with Xia Luo's question, the middle-aged man sighed slightly. He recalled his daughter's marriage contract and rubbed his hands nervously. He felt that he should take things one step at a time. "Xiaolu, what do you think of the Akkad family?" "Akkad family? Are you talking about the Akkad dominion that borders us? If it's Akkad territory, it's a place with potential, but the lord there has always been incompetent." The brown-haired girl's vicious comments made Brosnan's eyebrows twitch. Then, the long list of data that the girl listed made him speechless. The territory's development rate was estimated to be less than 40%. The roads were broken, the transportation in the mountains was inconvenient, and the border tariffs were always at the bottom. Sometimes, it wasn't even enough to cover the cost of the border checkpoint. It was simply a miracle. All right. I know what you think of the Akkad dominion. You don't have to say anything more." Brian waved his hand to stop Xia Luo's business analysis. He felt that he had dug a hole for himself, so he didn't know what to say. The Sorofia family was a business family. Although they had gone to war, the tradition of doing business in the family had not changed. Sitting in the commercial center of Rose, they built their country on economics. When they looked at others, their focus would naturally be on economics and statistics. The Akkad family, as a neighbor whose valuation was always high but whose output was always at the bottom, naturally didn't have a good reputation among the Sorofia people. However, as the head of the family, Bruce didn't think so at all. From a merchant's point of view, Akkad Hill was not good, but in terms of supernatural power and military, it was very good. After all, there was no such thing as a perfect territory. Lo She developed his business, which was why he was prosperous, but Akkad chose military force, which was why it was stable. From the perspective of a ruler, Bruce had a very high opinion of Akkad. At least, Akkad was a good neighbor worth maintaining a close relationship with. As for Xia Luo's point of view, Bruce happened to have some material to refute. "Xia Luo, do you know Luoya Akkad?" "Luoya Akkad? Oh, he's the only son of the current Marquis Dia Akkad. I heard that he was very naughty when he was young. Later on, he seemed to have a good relationship with the Nua Iyer princess of the theocracy. Let's not talk about his past or who he is backing. You have been busy with the fringe for the past 2 years, so the news is a little outdated. Take a look at this first, Bruce said as he handed the document to Xia Lot. The brown-haired girl took the document and read it carefully. Gradually, her eyes widened. The middle-aged man looked at the girl's reaction, which was almost the same as when he first saw the document. Indeed, the contents of this research report from Achates Territories' Sorofia branch could be said to be explosive. The various data in it were somewhat unimaginable, to the point that Bruce had to send someone to investigate it and reconfirm its authenticity. The tariff increase is 150%? How is that possible? Xia Luot began to concentrate on the report. She carefully read the policies of Akat Hill for the past 2 years. The more she read, the more she felt that the policies were ingenious. First, there was a never-before-heard action called Clean Up the Evil. The powerful military force was used to wipe out all the evil spirits in the territory. After that, there was a large-scale road construction that completely opened up the transportation network. After that, there was a cleanup of the city to raise the evaluation of the investors who came to inspect the city. Finally, there was a series of measures to encourage trade and a strange policy called poverty alleviation. The poverty alleviation policy was popularized by Luo Akat. It was meant to help the poor villagers become rich. The specific implementation was that the villagers would send workers to assist in the development of the village. The villagers would receive financial subsidies in the form of loans that would be slowly repaid over 10 years. This poverty alleviation policy was initially a joke among the lords who loved to scrape the land. Luo Akat was also ridiculed as a foolish young master who spent money recklessly for the sake of reputation. However, a year later, the data slapped these people's faces swollen. Akat Hill's tax revenue took off, and it wasn't a normal takeoff. It took off like a rocket, and it directly doubled. And this was only the first year. According to the internal documents of the Sorofia Chamber of Commerce, it was estimated that this rapid growth would continue for at least 5 years. How is it? Xia Luot, do you still think that Luo Akat is ignorant and incompetent? If this was really a decision made by him, then this person is not simple. Maybe he is a genius. The reddish-brown-haired girl couldn't help but praise. This made Bruce sigh in relief, and he also threw out his trump card. Not only that, Akat Hill recently submitted a cooperative development plan to us. It involves the entire southern part of Akat Hill and northern part of Rose. I think this plan is very good. What do you think? Chapter 128. In the Depths of the Holy Capital's Palace. Nua Iyer? Wait, calm down, don't. Clang. In a dark room reserved for the banquet, a blonde girl and a black-haired boy stared at each other. 2 years had passed, and both of their appearances had changed a little. The black-haired boy, Luo Ya, was no exception. 2 years had made his appearance more similar to the one in his past life. He had lost some of his childishness and gained some of the toughness of a man. His face was less adorable, but more handsome and spirited. The biggest change was his height. Luo Ya had grown a lot in the past 2 years. His body was more slender, and his shoulders were wider. However, because his family had been practicing spells for generations, he had inherited a small bone structure. Therefore, he didn't look very muscular. Luo Ya had changed a lot, but it was still a little lacking compared to Nua Iyer. As the saying goes, a woman changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood. Miss Angel's transformation was also obvious. Her blonde hair was still the same as before, but her temperament had lost a lot of her childishness. Gradually, she began to transform into a mature woman. She had grown taller, and her appearance had also become more mature. Her eyes and smile revealed confidence and dominance, and her aura had become more and more like a queen. She was less adorable than a child, and more attractive than a woman. Especially her chest, it was now a little bigger than the tablet 2 years ago. Simply put, she was becoming more and more beautiful. Looking at Nua Iyer's appearance, Luo Ya would be lying if he said that he wasn't tempted. However, before that he had to ensure his own safety. That's right. Standing in front of the blonde girl, he could feel that Noelle was too excited, and her emotions were a little out of control. The proof was that the two of them looked at each other for less than 5 seconds, and Miss Angel panted and pushed him to the ground before riding him. Luoya fell to the ground, and the chair fell to the ground with a clang. It was like a heavy hammer hitting the boy's heart. He held his breath and listened carefully. He noticed that no one in the corridor seemed to be coming to check on them. The boy let out a long sigh of relief and wiped his forehead. He couldn't help but look at the girl on top of him. Her cheeks were bright red. "Are you crazy? There were so many people outside. Speaking of which, why did you bring me here for your birthday? Don't you care about the people who come to see you? I can't help it. It's been 2 years since we last met. I can't hold it in any longer." "Can't help it? Wait, what are you doing?" But. The young man's forced smile was broken. Before he could finish his words, his lips were forcefully kissed. Luoya's hands reached out to push the girl away, but his wrists were clamped down by an even greater force and pressed to the ground. Nuair heard the noise of the crowd outside the door, and it gave the angel of abuse a different kind of pleasure. The intense excitement gradually heated up her body, and Nuair relied on her last bit of rationality to separate herself. She felt that it was time for her to control herself. Phew, what are you doing all of a sudden? What are you doing? Kissing. So, a normal person would kiss in this position in the dark room after not seeing each other for 2 years. What's the matter? You've done this 2 years ago. The golden-haired girl curled her lips as if she was doing this with ease. Luoya, whose face was flushed red from the Nuair's attack, was panting heavily. He struggled to retract his arms, but it was futile. "Give up. I'm at origin level 4. You can't break free. So, why are you holding me down? Do you even need to ask? Of course, it's because I like the feeling of forcefully making you mine in a place where those noble ladies who surround you can't see." "Ah, your expression is so cute. Seriously, don't seduce me like this." "I seduced you, my ass." Luoya could not help but retort at the golden-haired girl's perverted words. He struggled a little more, and looked at the beautiful Nuair in a gown with a strong sense of aggression in her eyes. He gave up completely. "I say, don't we talk every week? That counts as a meeting, right? You mean the few minutes of watching your sister by your side every week?" Luoya's words made the golden-haired angel raise her eyebrows. Her words were full of sarcasm, and it was obvious that she was angry. Luoya's face was more or less embarrassed. Originally, using the Holy One's short blade skill, Afterglow of the Crown, the Nuair's image could meet Luoya once a week for about 5 minutes. This skill was originally used by Miss Angel to check on him, but because the skill was mostly activated at night, when the Nuair appeared, Luoya was usually together with the AI Lizzie. Chapter 129. In a short period of time, a close-range fight took place in the empty room. Luoya, who was in a disadvantageous position, actively resisted. He kicked his legs and stretched his arms like a carp king that had come ashore. However, even in the face of such fierce resistance, Miss Angel was still at ease. The golden spell flashed several times, and 2 golden rings wrapped around Luoya's wrists. Nuair held his waist in place. Miss Angel gently moved her body twice, and Luoya's face turned red and he didn't dare to move. "When you struggle, I'm really excited. You're really a pervert. It's been 2 years, and your mouth is still so bad." After several rounds of resistance, Roja's cheeks were caressed by the Tyrant Noel. The girl's blue eyes were shining because of the power of the spell, and the sadistic smile on her face became heavier and heavier. Soon, she seemed to have thought of a good idea and tapped her hand. "How about this? If you learn to bark like a dog and call me master, I'll consider letting you go. How about it?" Miss Angel pinched Luoya's collar, and her eyes narrowed in excitement. She looked at the man under her with a face full of expectation and temptation. "Although you want me to step on you, won't that dirty your clothes? Or are you willing to accept my bare feet?" "I'll accept your ass." Facing the situation where it was either mental or physical abuse, Luoya's face twitched and he couldn't help but curse. The reason why he resisted so desperately was that he knew that it wouldn't be good if he was dragged in by this masochist. "Speaking of which, you killed a lot of mutants in the eastern region, right? Shouldn't your fetish be satisfied?" The screams of those monsters were indeed quite pleasant, but to be honest, they were a little low-level. Nuair rubbed his chin with his finger and blinked, as if he was recalling the feeling of being in a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses. At first, I thought that I would be very excited, but after experiencing it, I felt that it was just a release of the evil and warlike side of my heart. After all, no matter how many dirty wild dogs there are, how can they be compared to my favorite pet? Miss Angel looked down with her burning eyes. She felt that her appetite had been spoiled by Luoya. After tasting the delicacies, that kind of coarse bread is just a temporary buffer. So, what do you think? What do you think? You're such a sadist. Luoya cursed madly in his heart and began to think about how to break out of this situation. However, before he could do anything, a cold voice suddenly came from behind the two of them. Your Highness Nuair, can you please stop bullying my elder brother? Tisk. The moment she heard this voice, the golden-haired girl was speechless. She straightened her body and turned around, only to see the silver-haired girl staring at her coldly. 2 years had passed, and AI Lizzie had changed a lot. Her petite body had grown a lot in these 2 years, and she had become more ladylike. Her face had lost some of the fleshy feeling of a child and became more delicate. Her pair of red eyes were still the same, and her temperament, like that of a flower on a high mountain, was more obvious. Now, AI Lizzie's beauty was famous in the theocracy. Her soul-stirring beauty was like a mass-produced machine of love at first sight. Many nobles were addicted to her beauty and desperately tried to curry favor with her. However, in the face of these fanatical pursuers, AI Lizzie did not show any mercy and secretly taught them a lesson many times. However, unlike in the outside world, when Luoya was in front of this cold and unapproachable girl, she would suddenly transform and throw herself into his arms with a smile. Nuair was speechless at AI Lizzie's behavior of pretending to be an obedient child in front of Luoya. And Luoya was indeed deceived by her pretense. Every time, she would patiently comfort the frightened AI Lizzie and use her young age as an excuse to reject all the suitors. Of course, those dissatisfied nobles had also sent letters to the two's father, Marquis Kadia, but they were all like stones thrown into the sea. Nuair understood this. AI Lizzie was a genius, and Marquis Kadia would never let her go unless his brain was knocked out by a mutant. AI Lizzie, I haven't seen Luoya for 2 years. Don't you think it's a little inappropriate to interrupt us at this time? The blonde girl turned her head and narrowed her eyes. Her expression was obviously not good. AI Lizzie heard her and said indifferently, I can understand your feelings, Your Highness, but as the main character of the birthday party after 2 years, your absence has caused a commotion. Of course, the most important thing is that Father is back. Father? AI Lizzie's words caused Luoya to react violently. Nuair's expression also changed when she heard this. She removed the restraints of the curse, and Luoya immediately sat up. Marquis Kadia had been the logistics department head for the front lines for more than 2 years. During this period, he had only returned home once. It could be said that they rarely met up. Now that he had suddenly returned to the holy capital, it was a pleasant surprise for Luoya. Father is back from the front lines? Didn't he say that he couldn't make it to the birthday party because of a mission? It seems that he completed it ahead of time. Chapter 130. He has a marriage contract? How is that possible? Why don't you know about it? You heard it too. It was a marriage contract signed 100 years ago. Father never mentioned it, so of course I don't know about it. Then what do we do now? It's fine if it's someone else, but it has to be that Sorofia's Xiaolot. In the palace, Nuair and AI Lizzie were blaming each other on both sides of the tea table. The source of their worries was undoubtedly the news brought by Kadia, who rushed back a few days ago. Luoya Kat, the lover of Nuair and AI Lizzie, had known them for 3 years. However, a few days ago, during the banquet, he suddenly received an explosive news. He had a fiancée, and this fiancée was a very powerful person. Xiaoluot Sorofia was a beauty whose name spread throughout Xia. It was said that her beauty was as flawless as the fairies in the myths. She was an existence that made people want to give her everything they had when they saw her. She was an existence that would make people burn with love and lust. Of course, this was only her appearance. In terms of status, she was the eldest daughter of the Sorofia family and the future leader of the family. In terms of personal talent, it was said that she was a rare business genius, a top designer, and an artist in the fashion industry. She was an all-rounder that no one could find fault with. It's troublesome, it's really troublesome this time. It's fine if it's someone else, but definitely not Xia Luo. Your Highness, you've seen her before? Yes, I've seen her once. It was last year when I visited Rose before I went to the front lines. When AI Lizzie asked this question, Nua Iyer responded with silence. After hearing this question, Miss Angel frowned. After a long time, she finally spoke with difficulty about her feelings at that time. I moved. What? I said that the moment I saw her, my heart sped up. Do you understand? The Nua Iyer held her forehead as if she had given up on herself. She couldn't believe what she was feeling. The silver-haired girl stared at the Nua Iyer and suddenly stepped back in fear. Miss Angel was stunned. AI Lizzie? What are you thinking? For the record, I don't like girls. No, Your Highness, you don't have to explain. I actually support you. AI Lizzie waved her hand with an understanding expression that said, you'd better find that Xia Luo and spend the rest of your life together. This made Nua Iyer even angrier. That's why it's strange. That girl has a kind of magical power. It's not charm, but something of a higher level. Perhaps it's because of her bloodline, but she has a strange sense of nobility. Nobility? Yes, and the rumors about her appearance weren't exaggerated. That girl's charm is real. That's why I said it's too dangerous. If even I am moved, how can Luo Ye not be moved? Nua Iyer muttered to herself as she clenched her fists. She suddenly thought of Wei Dualiya's situation. In history, Wei Dualiya's relationship was thwarted because Ponte got married first. She endured for more than 20 years. Nua Iyer felt that it was already very miserable. She didn't expect that it would be even worse for her. Luo Ye also had a marriage contract. Once she became a Nua Iyer, she wouldn't even be able to endure. Endure until an elf dies? Isn't this a joke? No. We can't just sit here and wait for death. We have to find a way to stop this marriage. But what should we do? This kind of marriage contract is 100 years old. Elder brother can't unilaterally reject it, right? AI Lizzie's words caused the atmosphere in Nua Iyer's room to become heavy. There was no way to unilaterally reject it. This was the most troublesome part about marriage contracts. Setting aside the novels for now, in reality, almost none of the nobles would break off a marriage contract. The more powerful the nobles were, the more likely they were to break off all pretense of cordiality. At the end of the day, it didn't matter if two people were suitable for each other in a political marriage. As long as the person married into the family, it was fine. Most people would marry in name even if they weren't suitable for each other. For example, Ponte even fulfilled his obligation to have a child. Nua Iyer began to feel dizzy at the thought of Xia Luo fulfilling her obligation to have Luo Ye's child. AI Lizzie's face also turned pale and her body swayed. The marriage contract must be reasonable. Both parties must agree to it. Luo Ye's side is fine, but Xia Luo's side is almost impossible. But she doesn't even know elder brother, but she wants to marry him? Chapter 131. It's finally here. After 2 years, the flag is here again. In the study of the Akat family, Luo Ye's heart was beating fast as he touched the information in front of him. 3 years ago, in this study, the young Luo Ye's body was trembling as he flipped through the book, looking at the familiar family name. After that, one flag after another and difficulties came one after another. AI Lizzie, Nua Iyer, these geniuses, one by one, formed a connection with him. There were thrills and crises in the process, but they were all resolved by Luo Ye. Even the two geniuses were roped in by him. Now, Akat territory was steadily developing under his rule. The flag of the family was not completely removed, but at least there was no problem for now. In the system, Luo Ye had already paid 150,000 gold coins in the past 2 years. Although there was still 350,000 gold coins left, It was barely enough to cover the tax revenue of the territory. The old challenges were over, a new future awaited him, and new challenges were about to come. Xia Luo Sorofia, this character was Luo Ya's new flag. To be honest, Luo Ya was not as familiar with this character as Nuo Ayer. He did not have time to play Xia Luo's side quests, but according to the information in the public line, Luo Ya could roughly summarize a few characteristics of Xia Luo. First, she was conventionally good-looking. There was nothing much to say about this, it was just that she was not as stunning as a 2D character. Second, she was cold to people she was not familiar with, and was almost uninterested. Third, she was multi-talented. She was a real aristocratic young lady, but she was not weak. Fourth, she was good at strange curses. Usually, she needed money or gems as a catalyst. Fifth, Xia Luo was very filial. She had a good relationship with her father, but her family was more chaotic. The black-haired young man racked his brain to recall, and finally confirmed these points. He then began to analyze. If he wanted to remove the flag, there was no doubt that favorability was an important indicator. Whether it was AI Lizi or Nair, their favorability had been boosted by Luo Ya. Originally, Luo Ya wanted to hide from Nuo Ayer, but the results later proved that it was useless. And this time, facing Xia Luo as the betrothed, there was no way he could hide. Betrothed, this was a unique identity. To be honest, Luo Ya felt that it was a bit troublesome. At the banquet, when Kadia told Luo Ya about this, Nuo Ayer and AI Lizi had a huge reaction. The blonde girl lost her manners for the first time, and anxiously asked Kadia what was going on. The silver-haired girl tugged at Luo Ya's clothes and was about to cry. Without a doubt, giving up 2 flags for one was an unwise move. Luo Ya did not want to be hated for neglecting AI Lizi or Nuo Ayer one day, and then be stabbed in the back. Stabilizing the foundation was what Luo Ya had to do. And from another point of view, this engagement was also the easiest to remove, because in the original work, Xia Luo clearly hated this engagement. It was obvious that when a young girl was suddenly appointed as a fiancée, she would not be happy about this kind of thing. Some would even have an extreme reaction. As for Xia Luo, Luo Ya felt that she was the type of person who would stubbornly stand up for her family. The reason was that in the game, Xia Luo's attitude towards Luo Ya was very cold. She had once revealed to the protagonist that she did not like him, but because of certain reasons, when the protagonist and others ganged up on Luo Ya and beat him to death, Xia Luo did not do much, but she also did not show any mercy. From this, it could be seen that in the game, Luo Ya did not remove the engagement, and even used it to threaten Xia Luo. If the current Luo Ya did the opposite and was willing to cooperate with her to remove the engagement, and return Xia Luo her freedom, then wouldn't it be easy to gain a large amount of affection points? Of course, the removal of the engagement was only one aspect. If she wanted to completely turn Xia Luo into an ally, then she had to start with her family. Xia Luo had a good relationship with her father, and she was also a person who managed a large family. If she wanted to have a good relationship with such a person, then naturally she would not do anything without her family. In other words, as long as Akate territory and Luo Ya were in a honeymoon period, then even if Xia Luo hated Luo Ya, she would not do anything. In this regard, Luo Ya had many methods. Due to the threat of his family's decline, Luo Ya had worked extra hard in the past few years. Now, the villages in the southern mountain forest were much more prosperous under his management than 2 years ago. Every month, the number of carriages coming and going on the official road in Rose increased. Now the only problem was the Warren Mountain Range in the south of Akate territory. It extended out of the territory and into Rose's territory. The Warren Mountain Range covered a large area and was rich in resources. Normally, there should be a lot of treasures in it, but it had not been properly developed for a long time. Luo Ya had already submitted an application to Sorot. If the proposal was approved, the 2 sides would become partners and jointly develop this treasure land. This way, one was to share the risk, and the other was to gather the strength of both sides to explore further. With this relationship as the acting lord of Akate territory, Luo Ya had obtained Rose's goodwill and recognition. The 2 sides would become a community of interests. In this case, his relationship with Xia Luo would naturally become closer. Very good, no problem, no matter how I look at it, this carriage will not flip over. In order to leave a good impression on Xia Luot, Luo Ye could be said to have racked his brains. From the day's weather to the itinerary, Luo Ye checked everything, and even found a famous designer to design the dress. Xia Luot was a fashionista, so Luo Ye naturally could not appear too old-fashioned. The Akate family was more serious and based on the military, so Luo Ye ordered a slim-fit dress with elements of a military uniform. It was designed by Sorot's retired design master, Carter. He also had another identity as Xia Luot's fashion design teacher. Luo Ye did not believe that there would be any mistakes. As for the decoration of the house, after some research, the Akate family decided to abandon the luxurious and exquisite style and go for a classical style. There was no other way, no one could compete with Sorot in terms of money, so they might as well compete with their history and heritage. Akate family was a 1,000-year-old family. They did not have anything else but the collection of their ancestors and antiques. Luo Ye waved his hand, and the servants immediately began to move out according to type. In short, if he wanted to have a good relationship, at least he could not weaken his reputation. True friendship could only be achieved in a relationship of equals. Luo Ye's goal was to cooperate with Xia Luot to smoothly dissolve the engagement, keep his foundation, and then become good friends and business partners with her. After some planning, the young man was already confident. However, what he did not know was that the two girls were also secretly preparing. Chapter 132. Brother Luo Ye, can you sleep with me tonight? This isn't appropriate. At the dinner table, the silver-haired girl looked pitifully at Luo Ye after eating, and made a request that put the black-haired youth in a difficult position. For the past 2 years, because of AI Lizi's insistence, Luo Ye gradually stopped feeding her. The youth understood this very well. After all, AI Lizi was already 10 years old. Due to the magic element, the residents of this world were like fertilizer. At 14 years old, they were considered adults and could get married. AI Lizi didn't need anyone to take care of her anymore. But at the same time, a strange request gradually appeared, and that was that AI Lizi always liked to crawl into his bed. Generally, there were 3 reasons. Woo, Big Brother, the stories in the spell books are so scary. Big Brother, I'm having nightmares. Brother Luo Ye, I miss you. That's right, the first 2 reasons were sufficient, but the third was simply a forced reason. Luo Ye naturally rejected such a reason. He was already 12 years old this year, and his body was already developing. How could he be like AI Lizi who didn't know anything? But although he thought so, he couldn't reject reality. Every time Luo Ye steeled his heart and rejected AI Lizi, the silver-haired girl would hug her pillow and cry. Big Brother, do you not like AI Lizi anymore? Do you find AI Lizi annoying? Thinking of AI Lizi's pitiful sobbing, Luo Ye felt like he was going to have a heart attack. Once, he felt that it wasn't right to spoil AI Lizi like this, so he forced the girl out of his room. In the end, he closed his eyes for the entire night and saw the girl wiping her tears as she left alone. He tossed and turned for the entire night without sleep. From that day onwards, Luo Ye understood that he couldn't reject the crying AI Lizi. But that was just that he couldn't go on like this. Because of their bloodline, AI Lizi had become more and more beautiful in the past 2 years. No matter what, they weren't related by blood, so it was easy for problems to arise if they slept together. AI Lizi, you've grown up, I don't think it's appropriate for us to sleep together anymore. At the dining table, Luo Ye pondered for a long time. The silver-haired girl looked at Luo Ye's golden eyes for a moment, then asked softly, Big Brother, is it because you already have a fiancé? What does this have to do with a fiancé? Luo Ye's words, Miss Xia Luot, who has a fiancé, compared to AI Lizi, your fiancé, your fiancé, your fiancé, your fiancé, after all, your Miss accompany hers. As the girl spoke, her voice gradually lost its calm. She took 2 deep breaths and turned her head to avoid looking at the dazed Luo Ye, as if she didn't want him to see the helplessness and weakness in her eyes. Luo Ye stared blankly at the girl opposite him. He suddenly felt that he had been so busy preparing to pull off Xia Luot's flag that he had neglected AI Lizi. To put himself in her shoes, If AI Lizzie was busy meeting her fiancé, then Luoya, fiancé my ass. I'll break his legs for him. After thinking about it for a moment, Luoya suddenly felt a surge of anger in his heart, but he quickly sobered up. The youth coughed twice and tried his best to avoid the reality that he was a siscon. Yes, fiancé and whatnot are all the poison of a traditional marriage. How can I let AI Lizzie suffer such a loss? Even if she really likes him, she has to be free to fall in love. Of course, it has to be the kind that Luoya personally checks. After letting his imagination run wild for a while, Luoya's thoughts returned to the dining table. He looked at the silent AI Lizzie and sighed. For the umpteenth time, the love in his heart had won over his rationality. Okay, but let me say this first, at most once a month from now on. The black-haired youth sighed and said so. In the next moment, AI Lizzie's face regained its smile, and she jumped off the chair and rushed into Luoya's embrace. Thank you, big brother. You're already so old, but you still like to act like a spoiled child. It has nothing to do with age. Girls will always act like a spoiled child to the person they like. Luoya blushed a little at AI Lizzie's words, and his heart felt a little itchy. After dinner, the two held hands and went to the study to chat and read. Chapter 133. In front of the desk lamp in the study room, Luoya looked at the translation of the letter written in ancient Austin, and his expression gradually changed. The content of the letter was very short, and there was no difficulty in translating it. Luoya understood every word, but he couldn't understand them when they were connected together. The content of the letter was roughly as follows: To the Lord, around the middle of April, I will arrive at the Twin Horn Port with the egg. Queen. The black-haired boy looked at the translated content and fell into silence, and the silver-haired girl on his shoulder was also confused. Brother Luoya, what does this mean? Let me take a look. After finishing everything, the young man retracted his gaze. He looked at the contents of the letter, raised his hands, and summarized the key words. Through these, he could think of an ancient royal family looking for a child with a lot of money? Damn, this isn't a brothel letter, right? Luoya's expression changed as he recalled the shelf of pornographic books in the Labyrinth Library. He suddenly felt that this letter had a special fetish. This egg and the queen, could it be some kind of invitation letter? The boy's face turned red as he felt AI Lizzie's gaze and quickly shook his head to force himself to calm down. No, it shouldn't be. 200 years old pornographic books are already strange enough. Could there be a few 100 years old pornographic books? Yes, the egg. It didn't say it was a human egg. There was a port in the letter, so it was most likely a fish egg. Maybe the ancestor of Akkad just wanted to eat some caviar. But what's with this queen? There isn't a queen in the caviar business, right? She even went to the sea personally. Isn't that a little too low? Are you also the Prince of Planet Mayonnaise? Lord, Queen, it sounds like a chess title. Yes, these titles can't be some kind of code name, right? Luoya blinked as he was reminded by AI Lizzie's words. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the case. After all, although the word Lord matched the identity of the head of the Akkad family, it was still uncertain whether the recipient was the head of the Akkad family. Thinking about it this way, it might be an internal letter from some organization. As for what kind of organization it was, there were two possibilities. One was a political organization, and the other was an organization of superhumans. Considering the fact that the Akkad family had been so well behaved for so many years that they were about to decline, the first possibility was probably impossible. The most likely possibility was that a member of the Akkad family had joined a transcendent organization a few hundred years ago, codenamed Overlord, and had some cooperation with this queen. It was probably related to this egg. Both parties should have agreed to meet at Twin Horn Harbor. Judging from the date, this queen should have traveled a long way, and it was very likely that she had taken a boat. After all, there's an anchor on the wax, but it's really unique when paired with a rose. Wait, golden rose? The black-haired youth stared at the pattern on the wax seal and suddenly realized that he seemed to have seen this pattern before. Isn't the golden rose the emblem of the Serophia family? Serophia? Big brother, you're saying that this letter is from the Sorophia family? Hearing the name that gave her a headache recently, the silver-haired girl's expression became strange. She looked at the letter on the table and suddenly felt that Luo Ya's praise when she found the item wasn't very good. Can I put it back? AI Lizzie sincerely thought so, but Luo Ya shook his head after thinking for a while. Chapter 134. Xia Luo's Sorophia looked up at the starry sky, and she felt a little uneasy. It had been 5 days since Lo She left. Xia Luo's convoy had left the country, crossed the Warren Mountain range between the two territories, and entered the southern part of Akot territory. As a veritable rich family, Sorophia's convoy was obviously different. The dragon-like convoy was followed by a regular guard of 500 people. Although it wasn't a lot, it was quite professional. It was Shiya's most famous mercenary group that specialized in defense. It was a pagan legion that had signed an agreement with Lo She all year round. Their source substance was perseverance, and the god of the source substance was the ancient Mother Earth, who had fallen in the First Era. Generally speaking, the risk of degeneration was very low, and their reliability was very high. Mercenary was one of the few proper professions that pagans could engage in. Therefore, Shiya's famous mercenary group was basically composed of pagans. They generally wouldn't accept missions in Saint Maester's territory. However, as the saying went, there was no problem in the world that couldn't be solved with money. If there was, the biggest possibility was that there wasn't enough money. This time, the escort was really honorable. It was the eldest daughter of Sorophia, and the money was really high. It was 10 times the usual amount, and the mission wasn't dangerous, and the distance wasn't far. With these few conditions, what could the unyielding church, who had been relying on Lo She all year round, do? It wasn't easy to offend a rich person. Besides, money was really good. The unyielding church's mercenary group was very expensive, but in addition to the fixed escort fee, Xia Luo's personal belongings were also very luxurious. It was beyond the imagination of most people in this world, even the nobles. Strictly speaking, Xia Luo wouldn't travel, but her house was moving. Xia Luo's moving tool was called the gem necklace, and it was made up of 16 carriages. 16 carriages, this was the standard for Xia Luo's travel. Each carriage was a large caravan, which was equivalent to a separate room. The bedroom, study, living room, kitchen, and even a small garden for afternoon tea were included in these 16 rooms. However, it was not a big deal if it was only 16 caravans. The great nobles from other places could also get a set, or even bigger and more. The reason why Sorophia's jewel necklace caravan was famous all over the world was because it used a unique spell technique. There was a door in every room of the gemstone necklace caravan, and this door was passable. For example, Xia Luo felt sleepy in the study and wanted to go to the bedroom to sleep. Normally, the motorcade would first stop all the cars and ask the owner to get out of the car and move. However, in the gemstone necklace motorcade, Xia Luo felt completely at home. She could directly go to the bedroom after opening the door and entering the living room. That's right. The spell technique that allowed one to jump between carriages was the true uniqueness of the gemstone necklace. Compared to that, the luxurious and exquisite decorations in the carriages were a drop in the bucket. Therefore, unless Charlotte took the initiative to step out of the carriage, she wouldn't be able to feel any sense of reality. And now, it was Xia Luo's rare time to walk out of the carriage. Looking at the stars in the sky, the brown-haired girl did not have her usual confidence and boldness. On the contrary, she was somewhat confused and even weak. A marriage contract was not something that could be easily ignored by any girl. In Shiya, where political marriages were popular, traditional marriages based on benefits had always been common among the nobles. It could be said that the marriage contract was born for this reason. From the moment it was born, it was based on benefits. Therefore, it did not need to consider the feelings of both parties. Everyone in the marriage contract was purely a condition in order to achieve a result that was in line with their interests. Xia Luo had a sense of fear and natural resistance to marriage contracts. It was just like any young girl who suddenly found out that she was going to become husband and wife with someone she did not know. It was natural for her to refuse. And from the experience of her family, Xiao Luo did not think that this kind of abnormal product could breed happiness. Xiao Luo's mother was the best example. She was born in a great noble family in the Austin Empire. Because of the marriage contract, she married her father, Bruce, with the purpose of easing the long, stiff relationship between Lo She and the Austin Empire. It turned out that this goal was achieved, but the price was that Xiao Luo's family was completely broken. Xiao Luo's mother was a believer in the Austin Empire's orthodoxy. She was stubbornly biased against Lo She. After giving birth to Xiao Luo, she was not even willing to raise her by herself. After a few years, she returned to the country and lived separately. Xiao Luo and her father, Bruce, depended on each other for survival. The relationship between father and daughter was very good, but Xiao Luo's only memory of her mother was a few years ago when she visited the Austin Empire. That woman looked at her indifferently and did not smile. Her family made Xiao Luo have a natural dislike of traditional marriage, but Xiao Luo's experience in this regard was not limited to that. Sorofia was a great family, and Xiao Luo had many relatives. In Bruce's generation, in order to expand Lo She's influence, political marriage was the task of almost everyone in the family. Xiao Luo's aunt was brutally abused by a cruel noble, causing one of her eyes to have vision problems. Her cousin also stayed alone in an empty house for many years because of her dissolute husband, and she still did not have a child. On the surface, nobles were all gentlemen, but there were too many variables in their moral character. There were very few good people who were strict and had high moral character. Faced with this situation, how could Xiao Luo, who was about to follow in her footsteps, not be afraid? The girl was afraid, but at the same time, she also had some hope. Xiao Luo, your marriage contract was signed 100 years ago. After 100 years, you were born at the same age. This might be a kind of fate. Bruce's words echoed in the girl's ears, and Xiao Luo's heart couldn't help but be moved. Fate. This word had a special meaning in the Sorofia family. It was said that the first generation of Highland elves belonged to the goddess of fate. They were existences who could see the flow of fate, and were also the origin of prophecy and divination. This word had a unique charm. Although it was small, it did move Xiao Luo's heart, and made her yearn and fantasize that should belong to a girl of her age. What if this boy who was the same age as her wasn't so terrible? Although the previous rumors about Roha were unbearable, but since more than 2 years ago, Sorofia's investigation documents gradually had a good evaluation. Now that he is the acting lord, he should have some achievements, so there is nothing wrong with meeting him a little, right? At the very least, this was someone who was the same age as Xiao Luo, and not the age of the other country's royalty, who often jumped from 30 to 30. In terms of appearance, Xiao Luo didn't have high requirements. In fact, she didn't care about strength either. As long as he was upright, honest, kind, and could give her happiness and a complete and harmonious family, she was willing to give it a try. For this reason, she specially sent her personal maid to investigate. Gu Lacey, you have to help me look carefully. Under the night sky, the girl whispered softly, and her words traveled far with the wind. Chapter 135. Gu Lacey Sadie, the second daughter of the famous Sadie family in Rosetta. She had been hired by the Sorofia family since she was a young girl and had accompanied Xiao Luo since she was young. Like any maid who had accompanied their master since they were young, Gu Lacey and Xiao Luo had a deep relationship. This deep relationship was also the reason why Gu Lacey still insisted on staying by Xiao Luo's side. Gu Lacey was born in a transcendent family and was naturally gifted. Under Sorofia's nurturing, she had reached source rank 3 before the age of 30. Although it was partly due to the resources, with such strength at such a young age, she could easily become a powerful person in Rosetta and take charge of a department or even an army. However, under such circumstances, Gu Lacey had rejected all invitations, even orders from her family. Don't go. For years ago, when the 8-year-old Charlotte had shakily grabbed her sleeve and choked with sobs, Grace had already made her choice. Although she was a maid, she still had the feelings of an elder sister towards her family's young miss. The relationship between the two of them was not so much that of a master and servant, but more like that of a sister. As the saying went, reincarnation was a skill. To most people in the world, having Sorophia behind their name represented wealth and glory. However, in reality, Xia Luot, who was at the core of the family, had an unfortunate childhood. As a personal maid, Gu Lacey had personally witnessed Xia Luot's misfortune. It was a treatment even crueler than that of a single-parent family. Xia Luot's mother, that stupid pure-blooded Austin woman, hated her own daughter and even felt ashamed of her. For a little girl to be hated by her own mother, this kind of behavior was far more harmful to the child than one could imagine. It was even more terrible than physical abuse. Because of this, the young Xia Luot had a serious psychological shadow. After the bloodline awakening, Xia Luot gradually improved. However, when it came to marriage and family, Xia Luot would still reflexively reject and fear. To be honest, Gu Lacey strongly opposed her young miss marriage this time. The maid believed that only free love could truly heal Xia Luot's trauma. However, unexpectedly, she didn't know what kind of magic potion Bruce had fed Xia Luot, but the young miss actually agreed to meet with him. Since her master had made her choice, as a servant, Grace naturally couldn't say anything. However, she raised her greatest vigilance and decided to check on her perfect and delicate young miss first. In Luo Ye's previous life, ordinary netizens would often send their best friends to scout ahead. In this life, the nobles weren't stupid. Before the marriage, they would naturally send their trusted aides to scout ahead. Of course, this observer naturally had to be someone they trusted the most. The reason was definitely not to see how the other party looked like. For example, this time, Gu Lacey came to scout ahead and inform the Akot family of Miss Sorophia's living habits so that the Akot family could prepare accordingly. This was a very normal procedure for nobles visiting a foreign land. After all, the customs and habits of each country were different. Some people did need to be notified in advance. For example, some countries didn't eat mutton, so a lamb chop for dinner would be very awkward for both parties. The reason was sufficient, but the real point was to scout ahead. Gu Lacey felt that she had a heavy responsibility on her shoulders and vowed to find out reliable first-hand information. Luoya, what was the character of Akot? What was the Akot family like? Gu Lacey came to visit with questions one after another. Unfortunately, she didn't know that a large net had been opened more than half a month ago, spanning from Saint Lorraine to Akot territory, waiting for them to jump into it. Sorophia family's personal maid, Gu Lacey Sadie. I'm very happy to visit your house. Akot family's personal maid, Anna Eduardo. I represent the Akot family to welcome your arrival. In front of the entrance, Gu Lacey, who led the team, greeted Anna, who came out to welcome them. She was neither servile nor overbearing, and her smile was natural. It could be said that they were on par with each other. Under the clear attitude of the two leading ladies, the tone of the harmonious atmosphere was set almost immediately. Sorophia and Akot didn't have any intention of dwarfing each other, but they both abided by etiquette. Such a respectful attitude obviously won Gu Lacey's favor. In the past, she had visited many noble families as an emissary of Xia Luot. The servants of the large noble families were too arrogant, and the small noble families were too humble. There were countless such situations. In this aspect, the Akot family's performance could be said to be very appropriate. The bearing and upbringing of a servant to a certain extent reflected the style of the master. Based on this, it could be inferred that the Akot family had a deep upbringing. It was worthy of being a large family with thousands of years of inheritance. Making a plus sign in the small notebook in her heart, Gu Lacey and Anna entered the marquis residence together. When they first entered, Gu Lacey didn't have any reaction. The accompanying Sorophia family's servants also didn't have any reaction. Although the decoration of the Akot family's residence was good, it wasn't considered luxurious, and it didn't cause any surprise. But as the two sides communicated and moved, the expression in Gu Lacey's eyes gradually began to change. She looked at the sculptures placed in the corner of the hall, the works of art hanging on the wall, and even the small decorations in the corner of the stairs. She gradually discovered that something was wrong. Antiques, they were all antiques, and many of them were old objects that were more than a few hundred years old. As Sorophia's personal servant, Grace could be said to have seen the various aristocratic families of rosettes. Some of them were resplendent in gold and jade, while some pretended to be elegant. However, she had never seen a family as ancient and elegant as the Ackett family. Even the somewhat low-key style was something she had never seen before. As expected of a family with thousands of years of history, the entire residence was filled with antiques. The value of these antiques was much higher than the decorations made of gold and jade. Gul Lacey sighed in her heart, adding another point in the small notebook in her heart. Now, she was quite satisfied with the Ackett family. They had style, they had a deep foundation, they were rich, and their servants were respectful. Next, she just had to look at the young Master Ackett who was her fiancé. Young Master Luoya hasn't woken up yet? Yes, young Master Luoya stayed up late to study last night, so he woke up a little late today. Oh, I see, I was rude. Hearing the reasonable explanation, Gul Lacey softly apologized and nodded while looking at the closed door. Being diligent in studying is a good point, but he should pay more attention to his body. Thinking so, the servant girl smiled, but the next moment, the door suddenly opened a gap, and a beautiful silver-haired girl came out of Luoya's room in front of everyone with her clothes in a mess. At this moment, the crowd was silent, and Gul Lacey's smile froze on her face. Chapter 136. The moment she saw AI Lizzie, Gul Lacey's brain froze for a whole second. This was a huge mistake for her as in Source Rank 3. From this, one could see how much of an impact this scene had on her. Studied too late last night? What did she study? Was it physiology? Grace froze. Behind her, the servants of the Sorofia family froze. The servants of both families in the corridor collectively stared at the silver-haired beauty whose hair was somewhat disheveled. This behavior also attracted her attention. The soul-stirring young lady turned her head. When she saw Gul Lacey and the others, her eyes flashed with doubt. She lightly opened her mouth as if she was the mistress of this place. Anna? Poor they. Miss AI Lizzie, these are the guests of the Sorofia family. They are the servants of Miss Xia Lot, who is engaged to young master. Anna, who had been well-mannered since they met, seemed to be a little embarrassed in this situation. She hurriedly stepped forward to block Gul Lacey's line of sight. Then she forced a smile and explained. This is Miss AI Lizzie of our Ackett family. She is the younger sister of Luoya. They usually have a good relationship and often read books together until late at night. Younger sister? Read books until late at night? When Anna said that the girl in front of her was Luoya's younger sister, even Gul Lacey couldn't help but widen her eyes and exclaim in her heart. Gul Lacey glanced at AI Lizzie, who hurriedly adjusted her clothes to cover the kiss marks on her body. She felt her brain buzzing. According to the information report provided by Sorofia, Gul Lacey already knew that this young lady named AI Lizzie was only an adopted daughter. She had no blood relationship with Luoya, but even so, the two of them were still considered to belong to the same family. How could she act so recklessly? An abnormal relationship between a man and a woman within the family was undoubtedly a taboo topic for Gul Lacey. The servant girl's expression turned ice cold, and the servants of the Ackett family quickly tried to mediate the situation. Miss, you must be tired from staying up all night reading, right? Do you want to go back to your room and rest? Yes, Anna. My brother is still sleeping, so I'll go back to my room first. Yes, Mississippi. The silver-haired girl lowered her head and did not look at Gul Lacey and the others at all. Under the cover of the maids, she hurriedly left with her unbuttoned clothes. Gul Lacey looked at her back and suddenly found that there was something wrong with her pace. Wait, did they really have sex? This child didn't look very old. How could something like that happen at this age? Gul Lacey looked at AI Lizzie's awkward walking posture, and his mind was in a mess. Just like any adult who saw a young person messing around, the first thing he felt was disbelief. Maybe it's a problem with her sleeping posture. No matter what, it shouldn't be that absurd, right? The servant girl who was looking for a reason in her heart was a little pale. The good impression she had of the Ackett family so far was almost gone. Drawing a few minus signs in the little notebook in his heart, Gul Lacey took a deep breath and calmed his emotions. Although the Akkad family was doing well and had a deep history, the fact that Luo Ya Akkad had a relationship with her adopted sister made her feel that this family was not as upright as she thought. It seems that I have to re-evaluate the situation of the Akkad family. Gul Lacey regrouped, and the Akkad family also finished cleaning up the mess. Ai Lizzie was escorted away by the servants, and Anna led Sorofia and the others to familiarize themselves with the mansion. The rest of the trip went smoothly. The group confirmed the location of the restaurant, the situation of the kitchen, and the day's menu together. After the two sides finalized the various taboos when meeting, Gul Lacey looked at the guards and frowned. From the beginning, Gul Lacey felt a little strange. Although the Akkad family was a big noble family, there seemed to be some problems with the defense of the Akkad family. There were actually two troops with different uniforms in charge. Normally, even if there was a difference in position or strength, the guards should be wearing the same uniform. Otherwise, it was very likely that both sides would be less vigilant against strangers. After all, no one could tell whether the other side had new members or not. For this strange situation, Gul Lacey, who was also in charge of Xia Luo's safety, naturally chose to ask, but he didn't expect to get a shocking answer. This is the army directly under Her Royal Highness? Yes. This was a gift from Her Royal Highness 2 years ago when young master returned to the Akkad family. It represents the deep friendship between both sides. Anna looked at the royal guards with a normal expression. It was obvious that she was used to their existence, but the words she said shocked Gul Lacey to a certain extent. Gul Lacey had long heard that the royal family of the St. Maester Church acted as the protector of the Akkad family according to the ancient contract, but he didn't expect it to be to the extent of directly sending troops. From this point of view, the Akkad family, who had a good relationship with the royal family, seemed to have great potential. Although titles, territories, and the like were impossible to mention, as a big country, the power of the ministers of the St. Maester Church was still considerable. Not to mention other things, the influence of their political participation on the Church's diplomatic relations with the Rose Commerce United Nations was a big variable. Why did Xia Luo's father, Bruce, marry the daughter of a big noble in the Austin Empire? It was because Xia Luo's grandfather had a great influence in the empire. Similarly, if Luo Ya could also transcend the territory and lead the St. Maester Church to favor the Rose government, then Sorofia's benefits would be great. Chapter 137. Your Highness, these people are the subordinates of Miss Xia Luo of the Sorofia family. They have never seen you before, so please forgive them for their lack of etiquette. I see, it's fine. Inside the room, Nua Iyer, who was following protocol with a surprised expression on her face, subtly moved the chain in her hand behind her back. Anna also stepped forward to block it. Although the two of them didn't cooperate well, it was still a high-standard emergency treatment. However, this kind of cover-up only strengthened Gul Lacey's suspicions. Well, I've heard about his engagement before, so you can continue. After saying that awkwardly, the blonde girl quickly left the living room. Gul Lacey stared blankly at the princess who was wearing the chain in her hand as she walked towards Luo Ya's bedroom. In her heart, her evaluation of Luo Ya had already dropped to the bottom. This is one of the skills of the Saint's Dagger. It allows the projection of the princess to visit the young master. They have been good friends ever since they met, and they even write letters to each other every week. After Nua Iyer left, Anna squeezed out a smile and tried her best to smooth things over. The servants of the Akkad family also laughed along. Hearing these words, Gul Lacey's heart sank to the bottom. Originally, Gul Lacey thought that the Akkad family was trying to enter the core of the theocracy to seize benefits. However, after seeing the situation just now, she felt that it was more likely the other way around. The royal family was secretly controlling the local Akkad family and subduing the heir Luo Ya. Thinking about it this way, it was only natural that they would protect Luo Ya. The more Gul Lacey thought about it, the more she felt that this was the case. Although it was only a short time, she had already experienced the demeanor of the heir of the theocracy of Saint Mestre. The strong aura of a leader was obvious to all. It contained both sacredness and aggressiveness. How could such an emperor be conquered by a man? Not to mention a man who had an ambiguous relationship with his sister. After that, it was almost noon. When Gu Lacey and the others were about to leave, they met a black-haired, golden-eyed young man in the hall. It had to be said that Luo Ye's appearance had left a deep impression on Gu Lacey, but after experiencing all kinds of things, she was even more convinced that this young man was a gigolo. Gu Lacey, who felt that he had seen enough of the truth, didn't want to stay any longer. After more than an hour of discussion, some of them directly bid farewell to Anna. "Thank you for your hard work, Miss Gu Lacey." "Not at all. It's my duty to investigate these things." Gu Lacey waved his hand meaningfully and said goodbye to Anna, who seemed to have heaved a sigh of relief. When he walked out of the courtyard with his men, he saw a few maids drying sheets. Today's sheets are a lot harder to wash. And there's actually blood. Young master is really too rough with young Mississippi. Shoo. Someone's coming, don't talk nonsense. Hearing the information revealed in the gossip, Gu Lacey's face was already numb. She recalled Ai Lizi's unnatural walking posture when he left Luo Ye's room and shook her head. In her heart, she browsed through the results of her investigation and gradually made a decision. She absolutely couldn't let her beloved young Miss marry into this place. The next night, the gemstone necklace fleet. Before the dining table, Charlotte was completely unmoved by the delicacies meticulously cooked with mountain delicacies. Behind her, Grace, who had rushed back less than half a day ago, had a bitter expression on her face. She could only sigh silently in her heart. Gu Lacey still remembered that in the afternoon, when she had rushed back, Gu Lacey had rushed out of the carriage with a rare eagerness to personally welcome her, the previous observer. Unfortunately, Gu Lacey didn't bring the news she wanted to hear. When the servant girl and the worried but hopeful young lady looked at each other, Gu Lacey's heart uncontrollably ached. She knew that this was Xia Luo's attempt to start a family. It was a risk she took with great courage, but unfortunately, things didn't go as she wished. After keeping silent for a long time, Gu Lacey had no choice but to tell Xia Luo everything she had seen and heard. Luo Ye's appearance, Ai Lizi's relationship with Nuo Ayer, and the situation of the Akit family. In front of Xia Luo poured out everything in detail. And the result of that was the current situation. Xia Luo lowered her head in silence for a long time. The atmosphere in the room was so heavy that it was hard to breathe. The servant girls looked uneasy. Gu Lacey's stomach, which was at the 3rd level of source grade, couldn't take the pressure anymore. She had never seen Xia Luo like this before. Whether it was when she was a stubborn young girl, or when she grew up to be a genius, she had never shown such a strong sense of frustration. Even when she was in the fringe, she only suffered from insomnia, but this was the first time she couldn't even eat. "Milady, you..." Gu Lacey didn't know how to continue her sentence. Xia Luo didn't answer and only shook her head silently. Occasionally, Xia Luo felt that she was a person who had been abandoned by fate. Glory, splendor, wealth, and fortune. These were the impressions the outside world had of Xia Luo and Xia Luo. However, for Xia Luo herself, her subjective feelings were completely different. Her father who never had time to eat dinner with her mother who never showed up, her dining table, her broken family, and her lonely childhood. Those were the components of Xia Luo's childhood. Of course, as a member of Sorot's clan, Xia Luo had never lacked in material things. When she was young, she often used this to comfort herself, and the people around her would often tell her that she was blessed. She could afford expensive clothes that ordinary people couldn't even afford with their lifetime savings. She lived in a place that was comparable to the royal palaces of other nations. Her food was meticulously prepared by famous chefs. When she went out, she was accompanied by the best of the best. Therefore Xia Luo was blessed. And when she heard the people around her say so, she had always believed so. Chapter 138. In the tea room of Akat's house, Luo Ye glanced at the 2 girls across the table who were obviously not right. His small eyes were full of doubts. What's going on? What's going on today? Luo Ye, who had just woken up, frowned and began to recall the previous situation. Last night, the silver-haired girl who was supposed to sleep with the boy didn't arrive on time. At first, Luo Ye thought that his sister was asleep, But when he woke up the next day, he heard that AI Lizzie had burrowed into his bed again. Perhaps because he had been staying up late to read books recently, Luo Ye slept unexpectedly well last night. He didn't feel anything at all, and he even had a dream. Luo Ye couldn't remember what it was, but it seemed to be related to AI Lizzie. But it should be very satisfying, and he woke up very happy. But since the dream was fulfilled, he naturally slept for a long time. Luo Ye slept directly until noon, and when he woke up, he was even more shocked. He saw Nuo Iyer, and it was a Nuo Iyer with a strong curse reaction. It was obvious that Nuo Iyer used the skill Afterglow of the Crown. When he saw Her Royal Highness suddenly enter his room, Luo Ye was stunned. The skill Afterglow of the Crown's projection ability only appeared once every 2 years, and its long cooldown was simply speechless. It could be said that it was quite precious. Nuo Iyer used this ability to see Luo Ye. It must be something big. Thinking of this, Luo Ye naturally thought of his father. Nuo Iyer had been active in the eastern region recently, and this time he suddenly used a big skill to flash back home. Could it be, Iyer, why are you here? Is there something wrong with my father? Hey? No, Uncle Kadia is fine, I just suddenly wanted to see you. In the face of Luo Ye's panic, Nuo Iyer hurriedly comforted him. After a round of explanation, the young man was finally relieved, but then he felt strange again. As the saying goes, one never visits a temple without a cause. Did Nuo Iyer really spend so much effort just to see him? Luo Ye felt that something was amiss. If it was before, Luo Ye could still understand. But after the birthday party, the two of them had only been separated for a month. Even if they missed each other, they wouldn't be in such a hurry. Moreover, Nuo Iyer's attitude was also problematic. It was rare for the blonde girl to be a little dispirited, or perhaps it was better to say that she had something on her mind. It was unknown what she was thinking about. Her expression was a little complicated, and there were a few times when she wanted to say something but stopped herself. Please, do you have to be so scary? What was going on? Luo Ye was very puzzled by the Nuo Iyer's guilty attitude. He carefully thought about it, but it seemed that the Nuo Iyer didn't do anything to him. He had no choice but to beat around the bush. Nuo Iyer, do you have something you want me to do? I'm actually quite free recently. No. Alright, I took some time recently to learn about the art of tea. I'll make you a cup of tea later. Okay. Luo Ye looked at the girl who suddenly wanted to make him tea and answered vaguely. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure out why the princess was so attentive. However, what he didn't expect was that it wasn't only Nuo Iyer who was acting like this, even AI Lizzie was the same. Big brother, I personally made some snacks today, please try it. AI Lizzie was as cute as usual, but when the girl smiled and fed Luo Ye the snacks, the youth clearly felt something strange. It was a complicated feeling that was different from the happiness, and satisfaction of the past. AI Lizzie had lived with Luo Ye for 3 years, and the girl was conceited enough to know everything about Luo Ye's life. She was able to catch every minute change in her brother's emotions, and could even induce him to a certain extent. It could be said that she was the ultimate form of a brother complex. But on the other hand, Luo Ye also understood this silver-haired girl. AI Lizzie must have done something wrong, or done something wrong on purpose. With a preliminary judgment, Luo Ye blinked and didn't think too much about it. After all, if AI Lizzie made a mistake, how could it be called a mistake? My sister is always right, even if she's wrong, she's always right. Luo Ye forcefully cleared AI Lizzie's name, but he quickly realized that something was wrong. Not only AI Lizzie and Nuo Iyer, but everyone in the family seemed to treat him well overnight. The maids smiled at him, the housekeeper was more friendly than usual, and his personal maid, Anna, took care of him even more today. It was as if Luo Ye had transmigrated into the main character of a novel overnight, becoming the center of the world, and everyone revolved around him. If AI Lizzie decided to treat Luo Ye better because she did something wrong, then what about everyone else? Could everyone have done something wrong? It was obvious that it was impossible. Could it be that they finally know how good I am? After eliminating all the correct answers, Luo Ye came to this conclusion, then nodded in agreement, but he quickly discovered a second problem, and that was Nuair and AI Lizzie weren't fighting anymore. At the tea table, Luoya lifted his teacup and took a sip, his gaze reverberating between the two girls who were drinking tea and thinking about something. What kind of trouble was this? Usually, if AI Lizzie and Nuair didn't fight when they met, they would at least have a war of words, and would often ask Luoya to side with them, but today? From the moment they met until now, there hadn't been any conflict between them. This was no longer a case of the sun rising from the west. If it wasn't for the sunlight shining into the room, Luoya would have gone out to see if the sun was still there. Chapter 139. Xia Luot, Sorofia. Luoya hit. The next morning, outside the gate of the Marquis residence, Luoya, who had been waiting for a long time, stood opposite the red-haired girl and said their names. The black-haired boy looked at the girl in front of him and fell into a daze. So beautiful. Luoya couldn't help but think as he looked at the girl who politely lifted her skirt and saluted. As a person who was intimate with AI Lizzie every day, Luoya originally thought that he had enough resistance to female beauty, but when he saw his fiancée today, Luoya found that he was still too naive. If AI Lizzie's beauty was a creative work of art that could shock people to the core, then Xia Luot's beauty was a delicate work of art. At first glance, it wasn't that stunning, but the more one looked at it, the more one would be immersed in it. The perfect proportions, the godlike facial features, the slender body and elegant hair, the noble aura that could only be understood but not described, all of these were conveyed to Luoya. Paper person, no. Real person, very good. In terms of interests, the focus of the two could be said to be very clear. Luoya was studying, Xia Luot was making money, Luoya's side career was military command and territory management, Xia Luot's was fashion design and musical arts. Without a doubt, the two's interests were a bit biased and didn't have many points of contact, so after a few words, they chose to quickly change the topic and began to talk about their daily lives. Miss Xia Luot has already been involved in Sorofia's decision-making for 4 years? That's really admirable. I've only been the acting lord for less than 3 years. You flatter me, Mr. Luoya's wise name. I have also heard of it in Rose. I am ashamed of my inferiority to carry the banner of the territory alone in the absence of relatives. Miss Xia Luot, you flatter me. Besides, it's not like I don't have any relatives. Actually, I have a younger sister that my father adopted. Her name is AI Lizzie. At this point, Luoya, who was obsessed with his younger sister, couldn't stop bragging about his little cutie. His proud look was comparable to that of a father in his 40s. The reddish-brown-haired girl's face stiffened when she heard AI Lizzie's name. She recalled Gu Lacey's report and couldn't help but feel a sense of disgust. However, as Luoya continued to brag, Xia Luot's expressionless face gradually revealed some doubts. Something's not right. Although Xia Luot and AI Lizzie had never met before, would a normal person talk about his adopted sister in front of his fiancée? Moreover, his attitude was completely that of a parent showing off his child. Thinking of this, Xia Luot's heart skipped a beat. She recalled Luoya's many actions after meeting him. She realized that putting aside her prejudices, this boy still had a high score in her heart. He was even better than Xia Luot's best expectations. Could it be a misunderstanding? Xia Luot's eyes gradually lit up as she thought of this. Her heartbeat sped up a lot. However, what she didn't know was that her actions caused Anna, who was behind Luoya, to secretly frown. As expected, those little tricks have limited effects. Anna sighed in her heart. She had to admit that her young master had the charm to dispel rumors. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough. The servant girl put her hands behind her back and gestured towards the door. Not long after, a servant came in and reported that lunch was ready. Luoya and Xia Luot stood up and said their goodbyes. They returned to their respective rooms and made some preparations for the meal. Luoya, who was temporarily released, heaved a sigh of relief. He had to admit that making a good impression was tiring work. The servant girls took advantage of this opportunity to rush over with a bunch of cosmetics to touch up Luoya's makeup. At the same time, they helped him change into a more convenient outfit. By the way, where's AI Lizzie? She's in class this morning. We should have lunch together at noon, right? Miss AI Lizzie went out. It seems that she needs to purchase some books. She'll be back at night. I see. After trying on the clothes, Luo Ye nodded. He felt that it wasn't bad that AI Lizzie wasn't around. In his previous conversation with Xiaolot, Luo Ye could feel the girl's resistance towards him. Luo Ye wasn't surprised by this. After all, 100-year engagement was too ridiculous. Xiaolot couldn't say anything, so Luo Ye would take the initiative to release her and harvest some good impression points at the same time. After thinking through the process, Luo Ye set off. However, he didn't know that the two girls who were afraid of losing him didn't understand his painstaking efforts and had already added food for him. But there's also this letter. Thinking of the strange ancient letter in the book, Luo Ye put the letter in his chest pocket. He decided to ask Xiaolot if this letter had anything to do with the Sorofia family. It could also be considered as a topic of conversation. The youth walked through the corridor and met up with the girl who had also changed her clothes in the dining hall. Miss Xiaolot, you're so beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Luo Ye. You're just... The girl who responded to Luo Ye with a smile suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Luo Ye blinked strangely. However, what he didn't know was that Xiaolot was looking at his neck in shock. It was the area below the youth's neck near his chest. The originally white area had a pink mark like a butterfly resting on it. It was AI Lizzie's kiss mark. Chapter 140. Uncle Kadia, thank you for your cooperation this time. It's nothing, Your Highness, you're exaggerating. I was just instructing Anna to cooperate. In the eastern front lines of Tark Fortress, Kadia was chatting happily with a blonde girl on top of the city walls. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Now that the marriage contract was successfully annulled, Luo Ye should be safe. The middle-aged Kadia sighed. He felt that this major event that he had been worrying about for a long time could finally be resolved. That's right. Recently, due to Luo Ye's marriage contract, Kadia hadn't been able to sleep well. This was because this marriage contract that didn't seem like a major event could cause too many variables. To put it simply, it was too late. If it was 3 years ago, Kadia would have approved of this marriage contract that would last for 100 years. After all, Sorofia's conditions were indeed good. Kadia had also heard of Xiaolot's reputation. She was a good child. However, the problem was that she was late by 3 years, and too many things had happened in the past 3 years. In these 3 years, AI Lizzie entered the Akat family and became an inseparable brother and sister with Luo Ye. For some unknown reason, Nuo Ayer had a special liking for Luo Ye and even became his protector. And no matter if it was AI Lizzie or Nuo Ayer, they were both Shia's top extraordinary geniuses. And from the perspective of benefits, AI Lizzie was able to stabilize the Akat family's foundation and obey Luo Ye almost unconditionally. Nuo Ayer was able to provide powerful political resources and protect Luo Ye as her own responsibility. One was in the family, while the other was in the country. These two girls were both irreplaceable. No matter who won, Kadia wouldn't have to worry. However, Xiaolot wasn't the same. No matter how strong Sorofia was, Xiaolot represented, they were still an external force. To be precise, they were a foreign force. They had the motive to take over the Akat family. Even if they didn't take over, the only benefits they could provide were financial resources. But the problem was, did the Akat family lack money? He felt that Luo Ye was lacking in terms of development, but the ancestral Akat overlord Kadia had a different set of logic. Lack of money? Would it be enough to fund the military? Enough? Oh, then it's fine. Kadia had never felt that Akat was short of money, especially since Luo Ye seemed to be doing well recently. Didn't that mean that they were not short of money? Stability was the most important thing. Money was secondary. Besides, AI Lizzie and Nuo Ayer were free to fall in love on a first-come first-served basis. Why should they give way to a marriage contract that was made for the sake of profits 100 years ago? Kadia already had a stomachache when facing two transcendent geniuses. What would happen if there were 3 of them? Don't come home one day and find that your son is gone. I take back what I said about marrying more. Don't fucking mess with these girls again. Daddy is scared. Kadia was frightened by Luo Ye's situation, but he felt that his son was a little strange. He didn't do anything at all, so how could he make Ai Lizzie and Nuair fall in love with each other? Dia couldn't understand, so he decided not to look at it. This time, he directly instructed Anna to take drastic measures. He didn't want Luoya's children to fall in love with him the moment they met. That would be fun. Of course, there was also the possibility that Luoya would fall in love with other people because of his beauty. That would be a little too much. Scumbags had their risks, so don't enter this line of work. As for reputation? Don't worry, it's just a little bit of injustice. Dia would come forward to clarify the matter. Ai Lizzie was young, so she could be blamed for the prank. Nuair's dog leash was even more ridiculous. In 2 days, the princess would walk the dog with him and have a heart-to-heart talk. How could you blame others for thinking the wrong way? It was impossible for Sorophia to go on a blind date again. As for the aftermath, Dia had already written an apology letter to Luoya. He just had to wait for the engagement to be cancelled before sending it back. As for Ai Lizzie and Nuair, the two accomplices, it seemed like they wanted to give Luoya a lot of benefits. Dia didn't care about this. He was old and didn't know how to think. Looking at the situation, this matter should be settled. After listening to Nuair's report, Dia breathed a sigh of relief. He felt that things were settled, but was that really the case? If there was a fortune teller here, he would probably shake his head and tell this marquis an old saying. When the wind of fate blows, it is already difficult to stop. Xia Luot felt that the top of her head was a little heavy. In a special meeting, as the heir of an ancient family, no matter how lustful he was, he shouldn't do that kind of thing during his first meeting with his fiancée, right? Was it with the princess? Or the adopted sister of a mistress in a golden house? Or was it more like a servant or a woman? Xia Luot didn't know about this and didn't want to care about it. But at least when they met, Luoya shouldn't have left such a trace. Even if he was lying, he should have lied from the beginning to the end, right? Xia Luot was very familiar with the noble's marriage in name only and their unfaithfulness. But in front of the person in question, it was the first time Xia Luot had seen someone cheating on her in such an open manner. I wanted to talk more, but it seems like there's no need to continue. Chapter 141. What are you looking at? Disperse. What are you laughing at? Your face looks like a chrysanthemum. Don't laugh. On the first day of his meeting with Xia Luot, Luoya had a hard time eating lunch. He felt like his stomach was going to hurt. Damn, why is it so shameful? I feel like I'm going to die. When the black-haired teenager looked at the chef who was explaining the fish steak in detail with a smile on his face and listened to the musician who came from afar from Lorraine perform with a smirk on his face, he could always recall the moment when he was standing in the middle of the room and being stared at by everyone. That stinking woman. How could he just leave me behind like this? This is too much of a trap. That's right. Although Luoya wanted to erase Xia Luot's public execution from his mind and firmly lock it in the trash heap of his dark history, everything became very difficult because of Xia Luot's escape. Why does the empty chair opposite me feel so mocking? Aw, don't let me remember. Rohan gnashed his teeth as he ate. He was going crazy from time to time. Under the eyes of nearly 100 people, he forcefully used his bloodline ability to embarrass himself 3 times. Xia Luot's performance made the youth's head hurt. Even if the people present were his own people, Luoya couldn't stand it, especially when they stared at Luoya with strange smiles. It's an attack. It must be a substitute attack. The overheated Luoya forced himself not to run away like Xia Luot, but even so, he was a little numb. At the same time, he was also puzzled. That is, what's going on with that deceptive divination? After drinking a mouthful of cold honey wine, Luoya exhaled a long breath and began to think about how to deal with the current situation. Normally, in the original work, the marriage contract between Luoya and Xia Luot should have been maintained, and it was very likely that Luoya unilaterally didn't agree to break off the engagement. Then, if he wanted to remove this flag, Luoya should have peacefully gotten rid of this century-old trouble. But now, Xia Luot's operation was like chopping wires with a kitchen knife. The sparks and lightning along the way proved the beautiful future of the two's marriage. Luoya was stunned by this reverse operation. He had never seen such a scene before. She did want to break off the engagement at first, but the result? Luo Ye scratched his head and felt that it was really too difficult. With his good hand, Xia Luo didn't even need to cooperate, but now? Roha only had one card left in his hand. Charlotte threw 3 bombs, then the two of them held their cards and waited for death. No one is allowed to speak of what happened today. That's an accident, understand? After lunch, Luo Ye urgently gathered everyone present and repeatedly emphasized that it was an accident with the spell and that the result was wrong, but it was obvious that this warning had limited effect. On the other side, Xia Luo, who had escaped back to her room, was still feeling depressed. "Miss, come out. We didn't laugh at you." In the room, Gu Lacey looked at the girl who had wrapped herself in the quilt and sighed helplessly. She didn't expect that Xia Luo would end up like this after using the Arbiter of Fate. Using the Arbiter of Fate bloodline to perform a fate divination would consume Xia Luo's spell power, and now the girl was unwilling to eat because of embarrassment. If this went on, even if Miss couldn't get out of bed tomorrow morning, she would at least feel dizzy. Gu Lacey thought of a way to comfort Xia Luo, but before she could say anything, the girl spoke first. "Gu Lacey, what do you think of the result of my divination?" The girl's trembling voice came out from under the quilt. The servant girl pondered for a moment and said from a professional point of view, "It has a certain reference value, but there's no guarantee of the result. In the end, miss, what you're doing is just a rough divination with no cost and no clear goal. This kind of divination has low credibility and the success rate isn't high, and there are many loopholes. For example, the influence of the weather, the influence of the diviner's bloodline and source substance. As for specific problems, even if the divination result is correct, there are many loopholes." It had to be said that Xia Luo's questions in a hurry were mostly vague. The result of the divination was that both parties would be happy, but what was the specific definition of happiness? The divination said that 2 people would love each other, but how long would they love each other? Some couples felt that as long as they didn't interfere with each other like outsiders, they would be happy. Some loved each other for only a few days and then abandoned each other. These 2 possibilities were common among the nobles. From this, it could be concluded that Xia Luo's divination was actually meaningless. Is that so? Chapter 142. Burning, the bloodline was burning. This was what Xia Luo Sorofia and Luo Yakat felt at this moment. It was a feeling of surprise, as if something in their bodies had been awakened, as if the ancient bloodline had its own consciousness. At this moment, the hands of the young man and the young girl were connected through the ancient letter, and the curse power of the 2 miraculously merged together. What happened next was an explosion. It was not an explosion in the physical sense, but an explosion of the consciousness of the curse power. Intense light was emitted from the 2 of them, and in the white light, the 2 of them closed their eyes reflexively. However, what greeted them was not darkness, but an unimaginable scene. It was a scene of dozens of fleets sailing on the vast sea. Gold, silver, and gems, the art-like bow of the ships and the floating golden roses. In the midst of the sunlight and flying birds, the brown-haired beauty who was looking into the distance suddenly turned around. Her majestic gaze with a hint of playfulness seemed to have crossed the boundary of time and space and intersected with the 2 of them. The short illusion only lasted for a second, and the unbelievable scene came and went with the light. Blood-red light flowed on Luo Ye's body, and the skeleton formed by the curse power of the Gulan Daer appeared. Its glowing eyes stared at the letter in Luo Ye's hand. On the other side, the brown-haired girl lowered her head in disbelief, and looked at Gu Exen and softly said a word. "Golden Fleet." "Miss." After the light flashed, the door of the room was slammed open. Gu Lacey rushed in with the guards from both sides. For a moment, the scene was chaotic. The guards drew their swords and looked for possible enemies, but more people focused their attention on the letter. "Eldest miss, please let go of me." "Young master?" Grace and Anna's worried voice came from behind. Luo Ye hesitated for a moment and gently let go. The situation just now should be related to his bloodline. Xia Luo carefully took the letter from the young man's hand. The brown-haired girl caressed the yellowed paper and looked at the golden fire paint in silence, as if recalling the ancient legend. After a long time, the girl opened her red lips. "I'm not going back." "I've changed my mind, Mr. Luoya. Let's maintain our engagement." In front of the dumbfounded Luoya, Xia Luot said calmly. The Golden Fleet was an organization that Luoya had never heard of in history. Looking at the name, Luoya guessed that it was probably a fleet. "Alright, I really don't know about this. There's nothing in the historical records of the National Library either." Luoya, the historian, spread out his hands, indicating that he had touched upon a blind spot in his knowledge. Xia Luo was not surprised by this. In fact, let alone a lord of Luoya's age, even the white-bearded old scholar of the country of scholars might not know about the legend of the Golden Fleet. That's right, the story of the Golden Fleet was not history. It had already reached the realm of legends. The reason was that there were no relevant documents passed down. According to Xia Luot, it was a story passed down by the Highland Elves of the Sorofia tribe. The time of the story was roughly estimated to be around 200 to 300 of the Third Era, which was about 700 to 800 years ago. There were different opinions on the location, but the mainstream view was that the current Rose Commercial Union was further south, in the territory of the Mandel Kingdom. Of course, this nuisance of a kingdom's history was only 200 years old, so it definitely had nothing to do with the Golden Fleet. However, there were some ancient legends circulating in the local area. For example, the Mandel Kingdom was once the site of a great kingdom. From time to time, there were some strange items unearthed, but the overall value was not high, so the country did not pay much attention to it. Unlike the local rumors that were so rough that only a few sentences were left, the legend of the Sorofia tribe was more complete. Just like the records of the Third Era in history, the ancient Austenite Empire had gone through a long journey of migration, and after a few changes of rulers, their organizational strength and discipline had collapsed. When humans arrived at the paradise in the West, they immediately split up. Other than a group of die-hard loyalists of the Austen Empire, each leader led their own supporters to explore the new world. One of them was a tribe with Highland Elven blood. This tribe was different from the other splinter groups. Strictly speaking, they were not a peasant rebellion, but a technical team. This group of people was a research ship, or rather, many of them were part of the ancient Austen Empire's navy. In the Second Era, the vast ancient Austen Empire had a period of great adventure. People dreamed of exploring the world, excavating ancient ruins, and becoming rich overnight. Groups of adventurers advanced to the end of the horizon and the vast land. It was a bit like the era of the great geographical discovery in Luo Ya's previous life. In this era, the navy of the ancient Austenian Empire was very praiseworthy. According to historical records, they once fought a war with the scaled race and the sea monsters that invaded the land. They won the war and drove them out of the coastal waters, making great contributions to the expansion of human activities. Although Luoya did not know the combat power of the scaled race and the sea monsters, he could understand that they were probably very fierce since they were an ancient race. The Imperial Navy could press their heads and beat them up, so their overall strength should be quite impressive. Chapter 143. Luoya had a bad premonition. Across the table, the brown-haired girl's gaze reminded Luoya of a lot of things. If he had to describe it, it was like a beast on the verge of starvation seeing food, or a gambler at the end of the road seeing money. In short, something was wrong, and it made his hair stand on end. "Wait, Miss Yalot, I think you should calm down first." Luoya, who sensed something wrong, waved his hand. Years of playing games with Nuair had given him a premonition of danger. He thought for a moment and said, "Let me make one thing clear. This time, we are meeting for the engagement. The incident with the Golden Fleet was just an accident, an interlude, and this kind of thing only has a small probability of happening, so that's how it is. In other words, it requires a lot of contact and trial and error? That's not what I meant. After all, I have no obligation to help you in this matter, right?" Luoya was speechless. He didn't expect that the brown-haired girl would laugh mischievously as soon as he said that. Then, her expression suddenly changed, and she reached out to wipe her eyes. Mr. Luoya, I didn't expect you to say something so outrageous. You clearly let me use the arbiter of fate to prove our love in front of so many people, but now you don't even care about my request. Wait, don't talk nonsense. The old actor Luoya was stunned by Xia Luo's tearful appearance. He never expected that half an hour ago he had just played the role of a fierce fiancé defending his family's honor, and half an hour later, Xia Luo played the role of a weak fiancé being bullied by a shameless scumbag. Mr. Luoya, have you forgotten the friendship between our ancestors when they joined hands to fight against the enemy? Lust, greed, these are all human nature. For the honor of our ancestors, I'm willing to use my body and wealth to satisfy you, but in contrast, you won't refuse this one and only request, right? Luoya pointed his finger at the girl who was wiping her tears. He was speechless for a long time. He had never thought that this usually ice-cold young miss would have such a black-bellied side. Her fake crying was more real than her real crying. I'm warning you, enough is enough. You know the situation of our engagement. Half an hour ago, you wanted to buy it with money. I deeply regret that matter, but I realize that I'm not the only one who wants to break off the engagement. The beautiful eldest miss lowered her hand that was covering her eyes. With a smile that was not a smile, she glanced at the stiff-faced Luoya. The market environment depends on the relationship between supply and demand. I seem to have misjudged the situation before and almost lost 500,000 gold coins for nothing. But that won't happen now. Mr. Luoya, what's your impression of me? Xia Luo narrowed her eyes and glanced at the young man opposite her. Her charm made Luoya's heart skip a beat, but he didn't miss the girl's slightly curved lips. This girl? My impression of you? Sure, Miss Xia Luo wants to hear the truth? Of course. Then I'll be frank, Miss Xia Luo. Although your appearance is impeccable, I think that the most important thing is your inner beauty, especially your personality. It's not cute to like to laugh at others. That's really surprising. I didn't think that there would be a time when I have the same opinion as Mr. Luoya. Facing the black-haired young man's obvious ridicule, Xia Luo smiled and touched her cheeks. She neatly retorted, Mr. Luoya, your appearance may be able to charm many girls, but unfortunately, you're not my type. Speaking of personality, I think that extorting your fiancé for the first time is worse, right? TSK, this girl is really difficult to deal with. Luoya looked at Xia Luo opposite him and found that the information from his previous life was no longer useful. Xia Luo's personality would constantly change according to the different people she treated. At the beginning, when they were strangers, she was cold and polite, but now she was two-faced and mischievous. He had never seen her before, so he didn't know how to deal with her. Although this Xia Luo gave Luoya a deeper impression, and her flexible and intelligent charm was much greater than when she was cold, Luoya was now facing her. When Xia Luo revealed her hidden poisonous tongue, Luoya's situation was very bad. So it's like this, Miss Xia Luo? It seems that our evaluation of each other is about the same. Yes, I actually have something in common with you. To be honest, I'm a little ashamed. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.